endgame
Yeah.
without getting a toothless middle game. Alireza is thinking, and we know exactly why. Whoops, 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 whoops. What do you
And I
do?
think he's thinking a move too late. Daniel, what are the chances of him actually mixing this up early on in the opening? Because knight f3 really is the way to go. You cannot allow black to get that bishop out to f5 controlling this diagonal unless you've got some sort of a prep, some sort of an idea up your sleeve. Or what I've been saying is all wrong. And this is the great idea that Alireza had for his must-win game. Putting the knight on e2, potentially heading over to g3.
Yeah, I mean, he's just trying to get a position. If we could pull up an analysis board, I think some people in the chat will already find this to be familiar. But what I was talking about, the main line is queen f3, bishop g6, and bishop takes f6. But this triggers an early queen exchange. This is a great line to play if you want to minimize your risk and play for a small advantage for white. This has been studied since the 90s, and Magnus is not going to lose this position with black. I mean, he knows this very well. This is exactly up his alley. So Alireza was just spending some time trying to find a way to avoid the theory. He's come up with knight e2, but this smells. This doesn't seem like the kind of thing he wanted to get. Magnus is a very comfortable position now. Bishop to d6. Looks good. Knight b to d7. And a big problem, Tanya, is that if white completes the knight maneuver, if white plays knight to g3, the bishop on h4 is going to be like, well, what about me? There might be no bishop on h4 because of the threat of g7, g5. So this knight on e2 is really, really awkward. And I'm interested to see how Alireza solves all of these problems in the next couple moves. And maybe bishop f2?
I like bishop f2 because eventually the dream is to put the knight on g3 and try to get an e4 break in. You want to get your central pawns moving. So the bishop from f2 is really nicely placed, covering up the king a little bit, but also defending that d4 pawn, overprotecting the center for a future break. And I think Alireza is doing the right thing. He knows that he just can't play a normal strategic fight, a normal Carlsbad game, and expect to outplay Magnus Carlsen in that. He wants to get him out of any kind of theoretical preparation, any familiar territory. And again, just hit the random button. Just get a random position on the board where both have a chance, both have the opportunity to go wrong. We see knight g3 played. And Daniel, I won't be surprised if we do see a light squared bishop being traded off. But for now, the b2 pawn comes under fire.
I was going to say, I wouldn't be surprised to see an a4, rook a3 sighting somewhere there, but Alireza deciding to adopt a more conventional opening approach. Queen b6 is a really annoying move. That is an annoying move because queen to d2 is a necessary response. Again, you're avoiding the queen trade like the plague if you're Alireza Firouzja, but you also don't want to play e4 prematurely because then your center can collapse. Magnus could throw in the move c6, c5 at some point. So I'm really skeptical about Alireza's chances in the early going. Magnus is preparing bishop f8, making this e4 advance as hard as possible. Alireza basically needs a big miscalculation, a misjudgment, maybe a premature c5 by Magnus Carlsen. But the way that this game is going, the trend of the game seems to be favoring Carlsen.
And he's keeping up the speed. He's keeping up. There are no weaknesses in Black's camp. It's the ball is in Alireza's court. He's the one who has to create his chances in this one. Magnus needs only a draw to get his 8th tournament victory in a row. He's on a hot streak, win after win, not just on the games, but tournaments as well. And Daniel, I think Alireza is going to need a lot to stop Magnus right now, especially given the opening outcome. We've got, whoa, chaos button hit. e4 on the board, white's king still in the center, Magnus's rook already lined up. This feels like it shouldn't work. It's a bit too early.
Well, the blue arrow is not Meyer. That's the engine arrow. Obviously, Alireza wants to play e5, and that would trap the knight. But Magnus is so good at reacting to these types of impulsive moves. I like this choice by Alireza. I think this is the best thing that he can do. But Magnus trying to poke holes in Alireza's approach c5, a double question mark assigned by the engine. Now, let's all calm down for a second. I'm not convinced that c5 is a bad move. And the blue arrow is showing e5, Tanya. If we could put this on the board, e5, why can't black just play c takes d4? And how do you even make sense of this? Apparently, after bishop takes d4, bishop c5 runs into this very, very nasty trick, knight to a4. But the fact that the eval bar is jumping up and down tells me that I wouldn't put too much stock in the evaluation just yet. Let's see how this unfolds, and let's see if Alireza has the guts to push e5 in Magnus's face.
Well, if you don't push e5, it's kind of hard to come up with an alternative. Do you have time to go shut castle? Because black is threatening to anyway take on d4 and go in with that bishop to c5. With a king on g1, that just makes black's life even easier. I think Alireza has to go for it. He's played e4, you say e4, you say e5. Well, not
By
in
the
every
way,
position, but in this one.
the best move, according to the engine, wow, the best move is now rook 88. The best move on the previous move, I was going to say, was rook 8 to d8. Apparently, black should still play rook 88 and just leave this knight on pre on f6, because the thing for people to understand is that oftentimes a minor piece is sacrificed in a position like this, because usually you get at least 2 pawns and you get massive pressure in the center. So it's not unprecedented to sacrifice a piece. But Magnus's whole approach of moving first and calculating later, Alireza just called BS on that. And for good reason. Magnus can't, I mean, he plays c5 and he just got caught with his pants down. You know, he stepped out of the shower and now he's blundering a knight.
And the knight has no squares. I mean, you have to give it away. You don't have an option. Everything's controlled. The g4 square, the h5 square, the d5 square, the e4 square. You can run nowhere with that knight. So Magnus has to figure out what's the best way to actually give it up. And when you need only a draw to wrap up a match victory, this is really not the kind of position you want to play, even if you have enough compensation. Even if the eval bar says that black's got stuff to fight for because white's king is in the center, you don't want to have to prove compensation for an entire piece.
And I'll tell you exactly what Magnus missed. If we could pull up an analysis board, let me just show the same line I showed earlier. I think Magnus, in the back of his mind, had c takes d4 planned, bishop d4, bishop c5. Now, if white plays bishop takes c5, this works like a charm. This shows us exactly why this line can be so dangerous for white. Knight d3 and white's position collapses, you get checkmated. The problem is knight c3 to a4. These knight moves to the side of the board are very easy to miss, and they're a blind spot even for players like Magnus Carlsen. Why is knight a4 so good? Because if the queen just kind of casually drops back, well, at the very least, you could just trade everything on c5 and take on f6. And black is starting to run out of pieces, much like Magnus did in their first game where he sacked a minor piece. Black just doesn't have the offensive firepower to punish white's king in the center. Let's see what happens. C takes d4 is on the board. Alireza recaptures with the bishop, and we might get exactly this line. Doesn't mean Magnus is going to lose the game, but he's in big trouble here, at least objectively speaking, giving Alireza exactly what he wants. A chaotic position where Alireza is also winning on the board. That kind of helps.
But it's exactly the kind of position where mistakes can happen from either side, and Alireza still needs to be precise. He has to win this one. So bishop c5 on the board,
Easy
knight
clap.
a4, all done, and Magnus immediately blitzes at the move, queen to c6, so maybe slightly better than the c7 square that you pointed out, Daniel, because it does eye the knight on a4. But what does this change? Is it actually the g2 pawn rather than the knight on a4?
Yeah, this was the easy part. Knight a4 was the easy part. Now the hard part for Alireza is figuring out these complications. In particular, you have to decide, are you taking on c5 first, or are you immediately snagging the knight on f6? I think the former option is better. But what would scare me personally is bishop takes c5, rook takes e5. There's pressure down the e file. Again, Magnus currently material is equal, but Magnus can try to snag 1 or 2 pawns for the minor piece, and the conversion process, one way or the other, is going to be epically hard. We know how Magnus is just unbeatable. You can have more pieces on the board than he does, and somehow his pieces seem to count for more. It's like when Lionel Messi is on the soccer pitch. It's like one player is worth 5. So let's not count the chicks until they've hatched for Alireza. Right now, he's got to decide which knight he captures. That's a really, really hard call. Tanya, also rook c1 is a candidate move. This ain't easy.
He's playing Magnus Carlsen. It was never going to be easy. But I think he has to pick up one of the knights, and he chooses the wrong one, apparently. I want to point out one thing. My first instinct was to take that pawn on g2, but actually you have no threats. White can pick up the other knight as well, because the rook on h1 is defended by that knight on g3. So queen takes pawn doesn't work. Daniel, you're pointing out another idea, and I just want to say that's not the most natural move for me after giving up the
engine.
knight.
The engine was pointing it. I was pointing it out after the engine. I'm like, Newton inventing calculus after Leibniz. Miss Stockfish, the Leibniz, rook a d8 apparently is the best move with knight to e6, right? The only move more difficult to spot than knight moves to the side of the board are retreating knight moves. So apparently rook a d8 is just going to reclaim the minor piece, but Alireza probably spent the majority of the time calculating knight d3 check, which is the most tempting move in the position. At least for me, I would go knight d3 in a bullet game and then probably resign after king f1. And this is why I'm commentating the Chess.com Classic, and Magnus is playing it. And Magnus might not be playing it for much longer because he's just found rook a to d8.
He just finds the best move every single time. How do you fight against the guy? How do you beat a guy who not only converts winning positions flawlessly, but also defends difficult, tactically crazy positions to perfection? Rook d8 on the board. Magnus is down a piece, but Alireza's king in the center. There are two deadly pins here. The rook from e8 pins the bishop on e2. The rook from d8 pins the bishop on d4. It's hard to come up with a move. Knight e6 that you pointed out is a massive threat. Knight d3 check comes in with even more power now because the d4 bishop will be hanging.
Yeah, this is a classic example of tunnel vision at the highest level. You're fixated on figuring out the complications after knight d3, and just kidding, April Fools, May Fools, the knight actually heads back to e6. And it's just bad luck for Alireza that this bishop in the center of the board, surrounded by friendly forces, cannot be protected a second time. Another piece of bad luck is that you need to castle. Like, you can't afford to keep your king in the center. Alireza has to find a way to complicate the game. I would recommend bishop f3 and maybe knight g3 back to e2, but this is heading toward a draw, and that would be the worst piece of news for Firouzja. I don't see a way for him to avoid, Tanya, a total liquidation in the center, which would essentially spell a peaceful result and defeat. Queen d6, I guess? Yes.
Very nice. Just triple down on that bishop on d4. There's really no fighting this pin anymore. The one idea that I see is you take on g7, try to take on h6. Is that something to hope for? But queen takes bishop comes in with a check.
Yeah, and then that knight entrenches itself in the center. Alireza could try to pick up the loose pieces on b7, on g7, but at the end of the day, look at the way that Carlsen has centralized his pieces. I'm not seeing it, Tanya. I mean, maybe knight e2 can be tried, but this is heading toward a draw, inevitably. E takes f6. That was the big miss.
Takes on g7. Magnus trades off the queen. I see that wasn't the most accurate way to go ahead, but it is such a human way to play. You want to trade off the pieces, also defend that h6 pawn, making sure the queen doesn't come into any attack. You're giving up b7, but Daniel, can the rook line up against the bishop trying to pick up the b2 pawn? Rook b8?
Well, by the way, hats off to Alireza. He paused there, didn't panic, and I think found the best way to keep this game complicated. It's not over. There's still plenty of chess left to be played. And I think Alireza should snag this pawn on b7. The problem is that if black plays rook b8, the bishop slides back to d5, Tanya. The pawn on f7 is going to be hanging. And let's not forget, after bishop takes b7, black is down 2 pawns. Maybe Magnus is putting his eggs in the knight e2 check basket, trying to get piggies on the 7th, both rooks lined up on the second rank. But there's still going to be some defending to do for Magnus if Alireza can gather the cojones to take on b7.
When you're in a match situation that Alireza is in, I think that gives you a lot of confidence to play moves like this because you know you have to go for it. You can't just play cagey chess. You've got no choice at all. So you throw everything that you've got at your opponent. I am expecting bishop takes pawn, but Daniel, he needs to start making his decisions quick because even if he ends up with an advantage, he needs time on the clock to be able to convert it.
I think the move that's causing him to think is knight h5, which is tempting because you're heading to f6, but it doesn't work. Magnus can simply take on f3, move his rook away from the line of fire of the knight, and then slide his bishop up to g6. Great call by Firouzja. It's still game on. Bishop takes b7 on the board. The eval bar still believes that white has a chance. And most importantly, if you look at this with your own eyes, white is up 2 pawns. If black takes on g7 prematurely, that allows the white knight to jump into f6. A potential rook on e2 is not the end of the world for white. You could bring the rook up to f2 and challenge it. I love the way that Alireza is handling this stage of the game, making it as difficult for Magnus as possible. I still think this one will end in a draw, but white's in the driver's seat here. I mean, Magnus can win 1 pawn back, and he very likely will, Tanya, but Alireza's got the 2-on-1 on the queen side. He's got some winning chances here.
And that's a massive extra pawn on the queen side, right? Because that light squared bishop actually defends that queening square. So it's going to be a big assist to that passer, which will eventually be created with these two pawns moving up the board. And the other bad news for black here is, yes, you can double up on 7th heaven, get your rook to d2, start attacking the pawns, but that bishop on b7 really nicely defends that g2 pawn. So you don't even really care. You can first push that rook out, continue with the idea of going a4. That bishop on b7 is the crowning glory in white's position.
Yep. And apparently the top engine move here is rook e2 to b2, using this temporary alignment of the pawn on b4 and the bishop on b7, because you do have this one button that you can press, a7, a5. But that button can only be pressed if you're x-raying the b pawn from behind. Magnus is the kind of guy who would pause for 3 minutes and then find rook b2 and a5. I've played him enough times to know that that's on his radar. He starts with king takes g7, totally reasonable, just eliminate the pawn. But I really, really like, Tanya, this prospect of rook to b2. What did I say?
You know him well. You know Magnus Carlsen well. It is on the board. He finds it, so he's stopping any further pawn advances for just the time being. Also, that rook from d8 can join the activity. Also, an idea always to watch out for is that bishop from h7 sliding into play. I'm trying to find a square, and I was thinking bishop to b1, threatening a mate in one in some positions. Daniel, bishop b1, rook d1 check coming in. Just watch out for these ideas.
And how poetic would it be if we saw that move given bishop to b8 in the previous game? It would be so funny if we saw bishop b1, bishop a2. I would, this is why Magnus is Magnus. I would just play these moves because I couldn't resist the aesthetic appeal of making this maneuver 2 games in a row. But, good call, Tanya. It's on the board.
And you have to watch out because rook d1 is a massive threat. Rook d4 would walk into a checkmate in 1. And Daniel, you were talking about pattern recognition. And I think the fact that Magnus played out this exact same idea with the white pieces definitely helped him find this. And I think he saw this when he played rook to b2. This was on his radar right then.
And I think, just to be serious, bishop a2 is not the point. The point is to keep the white rook shut out of the game so that when you play a move like rook d2, white just has stagnation on the queen side. Because how does Alireza win this game? The only way Alireza wins this game is by converting his 2-on-1 advantage on the queen side into a pass pawn. But how does he do that? He can play b5, but then he's never going to be able to play a5. Magnus has him dead to rights here, and he's also setting up king f6. This is not moving in the right direction for Alireza Firouzja. He needs a big turnaround here, and we're just so used to Magnus playing perfectly in endgames that I think we're not giving Alireza enough of a chance here, but with 40 seconds on the clock, I just don't see this working out for him.
And you can feel the momentum shifting over the last few moves, right? Rook to b2, bishop to b1. Now the king is moving forward, coming on to e5 to destabilize. That rook on f4. Yeah. All of black's pieces are so active. You get the feeling that Magnus magically, once again, with the Magnus touch, has managed to create the counterplay in the endgame. I'm going to call on the prophet here. The prophet Bishop Daniel Naroditsky. Does Alireza manage to convert this one? Yes or no, Daniel?
No.
The prophet has spoken.
No, because it's a drawn position. He's got 10 seconds on his clock. And Magnus, f5, bishop e4, as always, finding all of the key moves. Rook h5 check. Great chance by Alireza. King f4 would have gotten checkmated in one move, by the way, to g3. And now Alireza wins the second pawn. Listen, hats off to Firouzja for the way that he's handled the task here. Unfortunately, Magnus's rooks are way too active, and it's not even really white playing for the win here. It's actually black playing for the win.
Checkmate in one coming in.
Magnus is now winning. Ooh. I think he can play e3. Yes, e3 is winning for black, but if Magnus wants a draw, which is all he needs, he can also choose to double on the second rank.
These are the last few moments.
Losing! Rook g3. Oh my gosh.
What just happened? He missed it. Magnus Carlsen reacts. He missed this resource.
No,
he cannot believe it. Look at him.
Oh my gosh. I jinxed him. And rook to g3. Why is that so scary? Not only does it stop rook g2, but now the g-pawn is free to move about the cabin. The seatbelt sign has come off.
And
No,
Magnus can't believe it.
I cannot believe it either. We will be in our commentator chairs for a little bit longer. It's now just dead loss for Black, or is it? Magnus needs to find some way to convert that E-pawn into something tangible. This is insane.
And Daniel,
No
you're going to
way.
tell us how. What did he miss once this is over? Because moves are coming in
Wait.
fast and quick right now.
How do you win
He
this,
offers
though?
a rook trade.
He
The
won
E3 pawn
another
under
money
attack.
move. Another money move. Rookie won by Firouzja. Magnus has no moves here, and the G-pawn is going to promote. Alireza is going to win. No freaking way.
It's coming in. It's only the clock. He's got 6 seconds on the clock. He has to do this. Can Alireza do the impossible? Can he come back from this position? G6,
I
Daniel.
missed rook G3.
Unbelievable.
Oh my gosh.
He's frozen.
30 seconds. He's got no moves. He has no moves. E2, not possible. Rook E2, rook trade, lost. Alireza's next move is G6. Firouzja would win this with 1 second left. Magnus doesn't have a way even to make this interesting. He doesn't have a way to set a trap. This is resignable. And I take responsibility for this.
If Alireza wins this, it goes into Armageddon. Rooks have been traded off. White's king comes closer towards the E-pawn. You could also go back to G1, but I think he wants to put that king on E1, just making sure the E-pawn's under control and the H-pawn, the G-pawn coming together.
King D3. King D3 has to be tried. Magnus still trying. Rook takes G7. Pawn. Rook takes pawn and king F1.
It's rook.
It's winning. That's it. That's it.
Oh my gosh.
The king.
Armageddon incoming. The king goes to F3. It hides. The G-pawn cannot be hidden from that G8 square. And Magnus cannot believe it. He's so mad at himself.
Wow, you never see this. You never see. Oh, and Magnus is furious. Magnus is furious, and he should be, because this is just not something you ever see from him. Absolute hats off. Round of applause for Alireza Firouzja. He was the only one in the room who did not give up. Even the commentators gave up. I certainly did. And I think people can forgive me for that. Magnus is, he is ballistic. He is going ballistic on the camera. He is mad.
Magnus Carlsen cannot believe that he's allowed Alireza Firouzja back into the match. I don't know if chat could see what we just saw, Daniel, but that is one angry Magnus right now. Do you believe in miracles? God. Hell yes, because Alireza Firouzja has done it. We've got an Armageddon on our hands, and Magnus Carlsen has to win this all over again.
Wow, Magnus throwing his water bottle. He was mad, and you can understand why. He had Alireza dead to rights. The game was over. He was one move away. In fact, Magnus was even winning. Let's go back to the pivotal moment. Let me explain how this happened. I haven't wrapped my head around it entirely, but here was the pivotal moment. It was rook c1, rook f1. At this point, the winning approach for Magnus is actually to trade rooks. This is anything but easy, figuring out that Alireza's connected passers are no match for Magnus's far advanced passer on e3. It's not the quantity of passers, it's the quality. This would have sealed the deal. This would have won the match. This would have ended our broadcast. Instead, Magnus Carlsen could have also chosen to play rook b to b1, but he dropped his rook back to c2, hoping to establish this mating net, forgetting that Alireza can slide his rook to g3, cover the key square on g2, and literally Magnus's rooks are as useless as, I don't know, name something that's useless. It's Magnus Carlsen's rooks on c2 and b2, because they have no way to deliver a check on g2. The pawn on e3 is contained by Firouzja, and his g-pawn seals the deal. Rook f2, rook e1, another excellent move, and Magnus has no answer for that g-pawn, which is now 2 squares away from promotion. Alireza finding all of the best moves, taking this to an Armageddon. What a crazy turnaround, Tanya. The CCT is just the gift that keeps on giving. And Magnus. Now the ball is in his court. Can he recover from that?
It's Magnus Carlsen, because he is so mad at himself right now for letting go, for that big slip in the end game. And Daniel, end games are his forte. He can win worse positions there. He can win just completely dead drawn positions. And in just one move, he's let go of the championship of Chess.com Classic. He has to fight it out now on the Armageddon. And a Magnus versus Alireza Armageddon, that's what dreams are made of. This match is going down to the wire. If Alireza gets this, that would be absolute history. He's done it in the Chessable Masters where he forced a grand reset. Can he do it twice? And Daniel, speaking of making history, there's more chess coming up and more history coming up as the inaugural Casablanca chess event begins on May 18th. 4 Super Grandmasters, including the world number 1 Magnus Carlsen, including the 5 times world champion Vishwanathan Anand, and Hikaru Nakamura and Armin Basim will represent their continent in this variant, where starting positions are taken from historic and iconic games in chess history. That is just so cool. You may recognize them, you may not, but the players better come prepared. Will history repeat itself, or will it be rewritten by modern-day superstars? Tune in to YouTube or Twitch on May 18th. That's May 18th. Mark your calendars to find that and use the command Casablanca in chat to learn more. Daniel, I'm going to say it. I am really excited about seeing Vishy Anand back in action as well in this absolute new variant. But right now, it's going to be back in action with Magnus Carlsen and Alireza Firouzja against all odds. We've got an Armageddon. Magnus Carlsen can't believe it that he allowed that. He's in absolute shock at what we just saw.
That was the
Daniel,
5 stages of grief, Tanya, in like 2 seconds.
It was unbelievable. And when we return, we will have our bids. See you after this short break as the bottle gets destroyed.
Do you think there exists an alternative universe where you are better than I am at chess?
Yes.
Yeah, he's not really sure.
Okay,
Cool. It's a tough question. Like,
have you ever used slang or trendy phrases you didn't fully understand, hoping it will make you sound cooler? I really hope so.
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah. Who hasn't, though?
Who hasn't?
Like, yeah.
Who hasn't?
I mean, I still don't know the meaning of half the words I say when I commentate. You can do better, Magnus. Hit me with harder questions.
Were you happy to hear that Nikita Vityugov started representing England?
Truthfully, no. I was, gutted. Still a bit.
Yeah, that's true.
Just after I became #1 as well, it was such a kick in the teeth.
Would you rather be competing in events or cover them?
Oh, I would rather, these days, cover them.
He had to consider that, but he's telling the truth.
Personal growth? Yeah. This is amazing. I'm proud of you.
Thanks. If you asked me this like 3 years ago, I would have said differently.
Yeah.
Definitely. Even 2 years ago. But
I'm proud of you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, how much do I owe you for the therapy session?
I don't know.
Oh. Made you think?
Yeah. You wanted me to take the pawn, huh?
We're playing like grumpy old men right now.
Yeah. Do you wish you had learned more mainline theory as a kid?
Yes.
He's telling the truth.
I mean, I wish I learned more as a teenager, as an adult. Can't believe you're going after my openings already. Like, you're not impressed.
Do you regret choosing chess as a career?
Took me a while to decide on chess, but I'm glad I did.
That's a lie.
Oh! There's other stuff I think I could have done equally well, but...
Wow, I feel bad now.
Yeah, football management is hard to get into, so it's...
What's the most embarrassing thing that's happened to you during a chess game? Okay, I gotta simplify the game a bit.
Once in a big money game, Armageddon game, I was so nervous I spilt water all over the board, fizzy water, and I went on to lose pretty badly.
Yeah, he's not really sure about that.
It's a hard question. It's a hard question.
Yeah.
I've never like wet my pants during a game or anything. Like if that's more embarrassing.
Do you like your own posts on social media?
No, I don't.
That's a lie.
I swear I haven't. Maybe accidentally and then unliked it.
This May, explore the galaxy, meet new and interesting species, and bring them liberty, freedom, and our way of life, one chess game at a time. Enlist now at chess.com. Welcome to the most exciting format in chess, Armageddon. The ultimate tiebreaker. Armageddon grants white more time on the clock, but in return, white must win. A draw secures black the match win. White starts with 10 minutes, and each player submits a confidential bid with an amount of time they are willing to start with. Lowest bid gets to choose their color, usually black, and those coveted draw odds. Let the Armageddon commence.
And we've got the Armageddon coming up. The match goes down to the wire and the bids are in. Alireza Firouzja wins the bid with 8 minutes 4 seconds. He gets the black pieces. Magnus Carlsen 8 minutes 26 seconds. Daniel, I think that's one of the closest bids that I've seen in the Champions Chess Tour. Is that advantage Alireza?
Well, right now it's advantage Alireza in either case, just because of the psychological state of the players. I have a little dent on my wooden IKEA table that I stream from. That comes from my bullet match against Magnus Carlsen. That was absolutely wild. Just the next chapter in a match that a book can be written about. And right now for Magnus, can he channel that anger into something productive? Can he channel it into good moves? Definitely a good bid for Alireza. Generally, the top players like to be black, Tanya, in Armageddon games because they believe that the additional advantage of being able to make a draw supersedes whatever time deficit that you start with. But that's not necessarily a statistically supported conclusion. I'm not sure that white loses more Armageddons than black. We'll see how this one goes.
And Magnus looking calmer now. We saw him raging earlier, but the only thing more dangerous than Magnus Carlsen is an angry Magnus
Yeah, that's
Carlsen.
right. Yeah, Evian should sign a deal with him after that finale. Another Catalan, and Alireza did have a little bit of time during the break to patch up some holes. He plays a completely different approach against the Catalan. Earlier, we saw in the previous game the C7, C6 approach, which is recommended by a lot of books. Here we see a wide open center with an early C5 strike. Very risky approach by Alireza. He better know this well because I've seen black lose a lot of games out of the opening in this line.
To me, the explanation for this kind of an opening reply to the Catalan instead of a more solid strategic fight is that Alireza wants to stick to his style of play. He wants to, regardless of needing only a draw to win the match, he's got the black pieces. This is the Armageddon. You play with time odds, no increment on the clock. But he's saying that I want to rely on what is my biggest strength, which are these kind of positions. Because the one game, Daniel, Alireza did get outplayed in was the Catalan, where he again went for a cautious approach. So I like this switch up a lot by black.
Also, for people just tuning in, there's no increment in the Armageddon, so flagging is very much on the table. That's why the time advantage is so much more significant without the 2-second increment. But the player's primary allegiance is to the position on the board. You can't over-rely on your time advantage because we know what Alireza is capable of with just a couple seconds on his clock, with or without increment. Right now, it's an early critical moment for Magnus. Firouzja threatening c takes d4. Magnus just spits in the face of that threat. He says, come at me, take my pawn. He's going to drop his queen back and then recapture it with his knight, presumably. I don't know. I like the way that Alireza has handled the opening. His knight can come into the game. It doesn't feel like Magnus has a big advantage, maybe any advantage at all in this wide open center position.
And it's a must-win game for Magnus. He has to win with the white pieces in the Armageddon. If not, it goes into the grand final reset. But right now, it's just started. And we see that Alireza, with his bid, did not have to give up too much of a deficit on the clock to get the result odds. So I think it was a really smart psychological bid by him. And look at that. He just keeps going. He plays e5, pushing the white knight back before carrying on with the development. So far, Daniel, it looks like white's the one who's got a little bit of a cagey setup. The activity on black side, but the e5 pawn is hanging. Do you need to defend it, or can you go for activity with bishop to f5?
Well, the e5 pawn is hanging, but the b3 square is also hanging. And I think Alireza investing his time trying to calculate his way to just like a forced draw. Bishop f5 is what is on my mind. Bishop e6 is sort of the sister idea, right? Trying to put all of your eggs in the knight b3 basket. And if Magnus is forced to play an incredibly passive move like knight b1 to d2 to cover this square, that's really, really bad news for him. Alireza could also send his e-pawn down the board. And yet, I think Magnus has to play knight b to d2. There's no way that he can get away with taking on e5 and allowing knight b3 because he just loses his entire queen side in the event of a knight jump to b3. So very encouraging signs early for Firouzja. Magnus is maintaining his 2-minute time advantage, but definitely no advantage on the board.
And you can't even think about picking up that pawn after a queen trade, because queen takes queen. I don't even think that black needs to take it with the king back, because you could anyway recapture with the rook. And the idea of knight b3 stays alive because white's only square is the rook to a2, Daniel. In that case, it comes under fire with that bishop on e6. So a nice move there by Alireza. Bishop to e6 will now eye that a2 square where the rook will be forced on. I'm really liking clock situation, whatever it is, result odds. I really like this as an opening outcome for black in whichever format.
And I'm really surprised that we're not seeing knight b to d2 faster for Magnus Carlsen. He might be spending some time calculating knight e5. He actually grabs the queen first. So I was going to point this out. You can trade queens and then play knight b to d2. Now, that doesn't mean Magnus is giving up his winning chances. He just believes that he's got more chances in the endgame as Firouzja dives into b3. Rook to b1 is Magnus's idea. This is why he planted a knight on c3 to vacate the b1 square. Bishop f5, though. What's his answer to that? Is it e4?
I was just going to say, aren't you losing material? Because bishop f5, e4, you just grab the e4 pawn.
He's going to have to sack the exchange. He has to play knight takes e5 here. And maybe this is what Magnus planned all along, sacking the exchange, getting a bishop to c6. But I'm skeptical about all this. He might have also overlooked the move bishop f5. And Tanya, I'm going to put this on the board. The rook is trapped. The typical response is e4, but after knight takes e4, we're not seeing an answer to the threat of knight takes c3. So the other option is just to sack the exchange. But is this really a serious winning attempt? Is Alireza really risking after something like bishop to d6? Maybe he is. Maybe the knight is jumping into c6. White's minor pieces are very strong. But it's decision time for Magnus Carlsen, and his winning chances are in serious question here.
I'm just surprised that the evaluation bar doesn't give more of an edge for black in this position, which makes me think that there has to be a way that white gets enough compensation here. And it's not so clear to my eye, at least, Daniel, where does Magnus actually find that compensation? It looks like he's struggling as well. as he takes a little bit of a pause. He takes some time. How
There
does
it
he keep
is.
the balance here? He does go for knight takes pawn, so step one done correctly.
Yeah, and I mean, people need to understand that sacking an exchange is not as radical as sacking a minor piece, right? He's got a pawn for the exchange. He also throws in an intermezzo on c6 to make it hard for Firouzja to get his bishop out. At the same time, you're subjecting, your pieces are in jeopardy. So Firouzja can also grab the bishop on c1. He's got a chance to do that. I think that he should take that chance. But I like what Magnus has done here. He's gotten the position as chaotic as possible. Basically, the shoe is on the other foot, Tanya. This is what Alireza was trying to do in the previous game. Now, Magnus is in a must-win situation in this game, of course. He'll have another chance even if he loses, but can he keep things complicated? An excellent move by Firouzja. King up to e6, hitting the knight, opening up the bishop. Magnus is on the cusp here. He is on the ropes. And knight d4? Ugh. Oh, knight f4 check. Okay, saving grace there.
But you just fall back with the king, right? Because you're still attacking the bishop and you're still attacking that e2 pawn because g5 is a threat on the board.
Oh.
So knight d4 still feels very nice to me. It's the move you want to make.
Knight d4. There it is. King f5. Excellent move. That king is super safe. g5. Magnus is going down here.
Oh my gosh.
Look at this play by Firouzja. So confident. Oh,
just
God.
bishop h3 check ideas, but he blocks it. At least the knight on f4 now is solid, but the bishop can get to it. Comes out, attacks with a tempo. Look at the speed now with which Magnus is playing because he knows the clock is his biggest ally in this position.
Yeah, but that's his only ally because right now Firouzja is piling up on this e-pawn. You do not want to play e3. If you have to play e3, you can bid goodbye to your winning chances. You're giving up the f3 square. And at that point, the game is ultimately played for 2 results. Right now, it's still played with 2 results. I don't see a way to defend against the threat of bishop takes f4 and knight takes e2 check. Let's not forget, Magnus needs to win this game. He cannot simply draw it, and e4 check allows Firouzja to just sack the exchange back on e4 with a dominant endgame. This is absolute mastery by the 20-year-old French Grandmaster. Magnus needs to find some way to keep this game going, and I'm not seeing it right now. Maybe bishop e3.
Can you give a check instead? Is e4 an option here?
Because the problem is e4 knight takes e4. You might have to play e4, but Alireza is going to sacrifice the exchange back and then just have a much better endgame, which is essentially unlosable.
Yes.
This could be over.
Everything. You've got more pieces on the board, more activity on the board. Tanya, is this also a bit of a psychological battle right now? I mean, Magnus, we know that he's one of those guys, maybe he doesn't believe in psychology, he only believes in good moves, as Fischer once said, and his chess is so good. But the fact what we just saw, the match could have been over in that last round. It was such a massive turnaround in that last moment. Is that also something you're fighting in your head?
As professional as Magnus is, you're still subject to the same human pressures and the same emotional pressures as the next guy over, right? So, it doesn't matter if you're Magnus or Schmagnus, how many tournaments you've won. He has to find it within himself right now to push all of those negative emotions aside and keep this game going. But Alireza believes that he can do it. Look at the speed of Firouzja's play. F3 by Magnus was the best move, the only way to keep this game going. But what about knight takes e2 check? Trading more pieces.
That essentially now Alireza just has free time odds. The clocks have leveled out.
And all he has to do is not lose. All he has to do is not lose. As you're saying, Tanya, knight d5. Normally, he would be playing this for a win, right? Normally, we would be saying that it's a game for 2 results. Black cannot lose this game. Magnus needs a mouse slip. He needs a miracle.
Right now, maybe he needs to calm down, and he's not being able to. He just rages on.
And that's what happens when you're tilted, right? You're tilted, you calm down briefly, and then there's another trigger, right? You get another disappointing result, and it sends you back into that rage tailspin. Alireza is just a couple of moves away, a couple of traps away, let's say, from winning this game, drawing this game, which is essentially winning this game. Can he play knight e3? That's the big question on my mind.
Yes, he can.
What?
And yes, he does.
No, this Magnus is just not right. He's not Magnus right now. He just gave this one away, and Alireza, with some brilliant play, is not going to lose this game. This is just, you can offer a draw at this point.
He's up in exchange. He shut down that white bishop on c1. If you take it, that's game over. The rook slides in. The b2 pawn falls with a double attack. Magnus Carlsen, I think right now is coming terms to the fact that he's got to play the grand final reset.
Yep. And he's losing, right? He's losing on the board. It's not like, oh, it's a 50-50 game. If Firouzja just plays a6 right now and protects the b5 pawn, in any other circumstance, Alireza is declining a draw with the black pieces here. He's up a full exchange for no compensation. In order to make a draw clinically, all he has to do is get this knight out of the danger zone, maybe plant it on c4, and then just sit. Sit and avoid losing on time.
But I love what he's doing. Just everything that he's done so far, it's been played out to perfection. He trades off his only weakness on the board, the f7 pawn, takes up more pawns off the board. It's an exchange down for Magnus for a pawn. The bishop in c1 doesn't play. The knight always has the c4 square to jump back to. If you make a move like king to e3, the king gets
There was one way to blunder. There was one way to blunder, Tanya. Knight b3, bishop g5, but again, Firouzja with 3 minutes on the clock. This isn't like the previous game. This isn't like the previous game where it's tactical and you're just used to Magnus being perfect. Here, there are no tricks, and Magnus is furious. He's bubbling over, but one way or the other, he's gonna have to coach himself, calm himself down, talk himself off a ledge, because he's not winning this game.
He's not winning this game. If he has to win the championship, he has to do it in the grand final reset. It's usually we'd never write off Magnus, right? Until the game is over. It's really not over till it's over. But I think, Daniel, this one, I really don't believe that Alireza at least doesn't get a draw out of it.
I mean, one miracle is enough for me. We had that miracle in the previous game. Again, take those question marks with a grain of salt. Remember that Alireza is not trying to win this game. That changes your strategy. If this was a Tata Steel game, he would be playing this very differently from the black side. He might even be going a5 and b4. Right now, Magnus's only slim hope, either a mouse slip, an internet disconnection, or Alireza gets too nervous, takes too much time, and then gets flagged. Alireza's not going to get flagged.
But he needs to make a move. They're both touching the 2-minute mark. I think Magnus is going to play this on till the end. He's not offering a draw. He's not accepting a draw. Resigning is out of the question. I don't think it's that I'm just getting ready for my second grand final reset. Let's get this off. Because this is going to be a bit of about mouse skills. It's going to be a bullet in just a few moments. And Daniel, I think the clock will play a role. But Alireza, his pieces are just getting more and more active.
If anybody's capable of this comeback, it's Magnus Carlsen. The problem is bishop c2, knight e3 is what I'm not understanding. Bishop c2, knight e3. Knight e3 sets up the threat of rook f1 and rook d1. So I'm not seeing how Magnus keeps winning chances alive.
Can you take on h7? Take the knight first?
Yeah, but king f4. But that's a draw. You've made a draw. Congrats, but you haven't won.
And we're seeing that being played out. King to f4. Nicely called out, Daniel. That is his match strategy. He doesn't want more than a draw at this point. King g5.
Listen, it's easy to blunder. Like rook d8. You mouse slip, you play rook c8, you lose. So let's wait for this game to over.
One of the best in the world.
b4. Let's do it. Let's go.
Are you really sensing some chances for white here?
No.
But, you know, as long as there are pieces and the rook cannot sacrifice itself for the bishop ever, because even if you manage to pick up the 2 pawns in the bargain, white's king is very close to the queen side pawns. So Alireza will never be able to go into a complete king pawn ending, which is a draw, by sacrificing his rook back for that bishop. As long as the moves have to keep going, but it's Magnus who's now low on time. It's 1.5 minutes for him.
But the other problem is Alireza could even if things go so wrong that he has to give up his rook. He can give up his rook. If he can eliminate the G and B pawns, Magnus will have the wrong color pawn. There is literally the only way that this game ends in a win for Magnus is a mouse slip. And Alireza is a premier blitz and bullet player. Even if he had 15 seconds with no increment, he'd have a chance to draw this. This is an Alireza moment right now. It's a Kodak moment. Is it a mouse slip moment?
It's not. And the moves are being repeated. But Magnus, he shifts it up. But the thing is, the king has got no way in. The black rook remains on the 4th rank, tying down that white king to not surpass enemy lines, not go over to the 5th rank. It's impossible for Magnus to make progress here.
My cat could draw this, and I don't even have a cat. Just take on g4, get your king back to h6. This is too easy for Mr. Firouzja. And still, you know,
force?
look at how he's taking his time. He's not rushing,
Rook
and
B8.
Magnus is resigned. That's it. We're on to a grand final reset, Tanya.
And that could have been a draw, but Magnus just resigns because the result is the same. Magnus had to win. Alireza Firouzja does it. He does the impossible. He takes it to the grand final reset. What a match this has been. Daniel, he's done it before in the Chessable Masters, defeated Magnus in the first set. He repeats it again. And what a storyline. 2 draws. Magnus takes the lead in that third game. A fantastic classic Magnus victory. And then that 4th topsy-turvy roller coaster ride that we saw, and then winning the Armageddon. We've got a grand final reset coming up.
Listen, it's so easy to go into sort of Magnus fanboy mode and forget that he is facing some absolute monsters who have beaten him before, right? We talked about the head-to-head score in Rapid and Blitz time controls. It's closer than one might suspect. Alireza knows how to make Magnus uncomfortable. I still am wrapping my head around the miracle that we just observed, but let's take our hat off to Alireza. Let's also not forget that the slate is now wiped clean. It's a tabula rasa, and Alireza has to do what he just did again in the same day against the same opponent. He needs more luck. He needs more skill, and he's shown plenty of both already. For Magnus Carlsen, you got to calm down, because very, very clearly, Tanya, that short break was not enough time for Magnus to hit the reset button mentally.
And the margin for error in the grand final reset is non-existent because it changes, Daniel. It's a best of 2 match. You go wrong in the first game and that is all over. So it's going to be fast, it's going to be furious, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And speaking of fast, we've got faster chess coming up, as the Hyperbullet Championship title is up for grabs, and you can claim the title. The first event in the brand new Chess.com Community Championships series begins with the $2,000 Hyperbullet Championship on May 30th and 31st. Are you the player in this crazy, ultra speedy time control? Use the command Hyper to throw your hat in the ring and get practicing for this absolute crazy arena. Wow, Daniel, the players will be back in our arena as set 1 went down to the wire. But Firouzja has forced a grand final reset. And in the break, to cool off for everyone, learn about a Chess.com love story. I wasn't expecting that to come up. That's going to be fun. But when we return, set 2 of the Chess.com Classic Grand Final will be played out. Can Firouzja go all the way? Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a few.
Looking for new ways to enjoy chess? Check out our schedule of Chess.com community events today. Mondays, play Rapid Opening Roulette and expand your opening repertoire with a new opening each month. Tuesdays, compete against other Untitled players in Untitled Tuesday. Battle your way to the top in Arena Kings on Wednesdays. And finish the week off each Saturday with the blistering Community Bullet Brawl. All happening in the Community Club on Chess.com. Looking for some cool merch or a gift for that person who loves chess? We've got you covered in our all-new merch store. Literally, from head to toe. Whether it's a hot date or just hanging out, it's always chess time somewhere. Just ask Mittens. Okay, well, Mittens is just a stuffed toy, so maybe don't ask Mittens. But you can check it all out at chess.com/shop right now.
In the chill of February 2022, Ralph Keller was procrastinating work in his hometown, Paderborn, Germany, and decided to play on Chess.com. Simultaneously in Como, Italy, Valeria Uman, while contemplating her life, also logged on the platform and clicked play. They were instantly paired up, and the course of their lives changed forever.
Hi, Chess.com, I'm Valeria.
And I'm Ralph.
And we met on chess.com after a game in February 2022. I blundered with the bishop. What shook me was that he blundered as well on purpose to be then even. Then we started talking German again because he was interested on why I was with the Italian flag talking German. I've just had last week's the desire to get better in German since it's a long time I don't study it. We then started series of games in the following days, and we chatted after each game on the game chat.
But then after some time, but definitely months, we exchanged the numbers.
He came to Como. He said he had the possibility to take a holiday, and I said I can lead you around the city. I wasn't really sure about what I was doing. I'm not very used to meet people I met online on chess.com, so doesn't happen every day. I was very nicely surprised because we spent many hours together.
She brought me a pack of like sweets to have on my travel back, and that was something that really stuck in my mind. It was very nice sweets, but especially the gesture was very sweet.
And when we first met, he gave me a book of chess techniques.
Yeah, obviously.
Didn't work yet. I really felt I wanted to meet him again when I could have had the possibility. 2 months later, I went in Germany. Yeah. And I would say when the things started, it was there.
I'm very happy that this fortunate series of events, coincidences happened like this. I mean, I feel like it's a very unlikely thing to happen, but
yes, everyone is always very happy to hear how we met.
I would like to give a shout out to Gotham Chess. He got me into chess, so it's kind of his fault as well.
But unfortunately, you're playing Magnus Carlsen, and he is a marathon man.
Whoa! Magnus Carlsen lost on time! Are you kidding me?
A big threat. This is getting crazy. Where is the checkmate coming in? Do you just...
Oh, there we go.
Oh,
what?
What a finish! That was sick from Alireza.
He's missed it!
Oh
He's missed
God.
93!
Lights out. This is absolutely insane.
Oh, wow. What a move!
And just before he reacts, he gets the dub.
Is a massive threat.
Over.
There we go. Vinci Climber wins Division 2. We see a checkmating pattern with it. And the youngsters have struck back.
Oh! He won for me!
Unbelievable Armageddon. Oh my God.
Magnus has blundered.
It's completely winning for Firouzja now.
Wow, don't try this at home.
It comes down to this.
Whoa, Robert, a sacrifice.
What a comeback from the champ.
The playing field is level. A winner is inevitable. Alireza Firouzja, he forces a grand final reset. Magnus Carlsen has to do what he did in the Chessable Masters. It's a storyline that we've seen happen before. Can Magnus do it for the second time? And let's take a look at our bracket before the action begins. Many of you in our chat must be wondering, Daniel, why Alireza Firouzja has to fight all over again. And that is the magic of the double elimination bracket. It's because Magnus Carlsen cruised through the entire event up to the grand final in the winner's bracket, winning every single match. While for Alireza Firouzja, it was through the loser's bracket on his last life. And this one time for Magnus Carlsen, that extra life really counts.
Listen, this match will be discussed for a long time to come on the internets. And Magnus is like an experienced pilot. We're just so unused to pilot error from Magnus. And the one player who's caused Magnus to slip up in critical moments throughout his career has been Alireza Firouzja, winning on demand that fourth game which will be clipped and shipped and watched for generations to come, and then winning the Armageddon. But now the sick twist of irony is that it's not enough to pull off a miracle one time. You're going to have to do it twice. But let me tell you, Alireza is thrilled to be here. He's been here before. Did not manage to pull off the second miracle in the first Chessable Masters tournament. That one he lost 2-0. Something tells me there's something magical, something interesting in the air tonight. Will Alireza break the trend? Will he win a second match in a row and follow in MVL's footsteps?
Few would have predicted that this match would go to the grand final reset. And that storyline, that scoreline that we just saw from the Chessable Masters in that grand final reset, it doesn't tell the full story. Alireza was so close to getting a huge advantage in his game one as well in that last event. This time, if that happens, he will have to make the most of all the opportunities that he gets. Magnus Carlsen currently, Daniel, he's a wounded beast. But that makes him even more dangerous. He could have wrapped this up, and he knows it. It went into an Armageddon, and that was just a non-Magnus Armageddon. It felt like he was still recovering from everything that had happened in Game 4 of their set 1. Look at him on the camera. Do you think he's still recovering from it?
He's still recovering. He's going to be recovering for a while. And listen, Magnus is not upset because, I might lose this final. It's not about the result or the prize fund. When you flirt with perfection for so many years, you're upset because of the mistakes that you made. I think if I'm in Magnus's shoes, I'm upset not because I have to play another match or because Alireza has a moment in the sun. It's purely because he is pissed that he lost that end game, period. He is pissed at the moves that he made. He has to find a way to push that aside to counteract all of those negative emotions, because when you get tilted, you start playing quickly, you start playing too aggressively, and it doesn't matter if you're Bob Jones off the street playing your second chess game ever, or you're Magnus Carlsen with 25 years of experience behind you. Tilt is a very, very dangerous thing to feel when you're playing a match against Alireza Firouzja. Let's see how Magnus handles it. Something tells me that the wounded beast will breathe some more fire in this best of two match.
The tilt is real, but the tilt needs to stop now for Magnus. It's a best of two. 1.5 points doesn't only win the match, it wins the championship. Alireza Firouzja forcing this grand final reset. He just looks so calm and composed. No emotion there. And Daniel, his control on his nerves has been amazing to watch today.
It's been incredible. I mean, the way that he's able to keep chances alive as the next game is underway. Let's pull that one up. The way that he's able to compose himself in time pressure, even through the game that he lost. I mean, he has been resilient. He's been universal. He's been tactically sharp. This is the best version of Alireza. This is the Alireza that maybe still one day will be fighting for the world championship title. But right now we have a best of two match. Magnus has the white pieces, and he has reverted back to the most popular opening in recent times, the Italian. Boo. Boo.
And I think that's the reaction that a lot of people have to the Italian, because it's such a cagey, slow opening to start with. But Daniel, it's also the most difficult one to face, because there are all these little moves and little ideas like, does white include h2, h3? Does white include the a pawn moving forward to a4? Where and when does the bishop fall back? Is black first to strike in the center with d5? Or does white get a central break in with d4? And usually it is a slow start, but once we see a central break in, things start to get spicy.
Definitely. Much like the Berlin, the Italian has this reputation as a boring opening. Where does that reputation come from? Because when it's played properly. And when two super GMs make a quick draw in an Italian, we assume it's easy. Then you sit down in front of the black piece and you're like, wait a second, what the heck do I do? We saw this in the CCT play, and Fabiano Caruana, one of the top Italian experts, he won a couple of games against GMs in like 20 moves. He beat Adam Kozak. A single inaccuracy, playing d5 at the wrong moment, playing bishop e6 at the wrong moment can cost you the game very quickly. So it's an opening with a lot of teeth. Right now, Magnus Carlsen is taking his time. Queen to b3, not a very conventional approach to this position, forcing Alireza's rook back to f8. I am more used to seeing a pawn on b4 before the queen gets to b3. Try saying that 10 times in a row. Will this position appear on the board 10 times in a row?
Well, the one thing that's a bit of a drawback with the queen moving from the d1 square is that the black knight can jump to h5, because you don't have these tactics of knight takes pawn on e5, because the queen from d1 would have then picked up the knight. So you always have to watch out for that black knight eventually landing on that f4 square, which is an idea that usually works in black's favor.
There's also a trap that I really like to point out. I'm going to put this on the board just so we can get a better hang of what's going on. Alireza has a lot of moves in this position. He can go king h8, h6. So it's hard to predict what he's going to do. If he plays knight h5, bishop to d5 sometimes runs into this really cool tactic. In this position, knight f4 is also good. But I just want to point out knight takes a5 is very commonly missed by top players. Rook takes a5. And then c6, opening up a double attack on the bishop and the rook. This is a trick that is found in the Gleck system from the white side. So I always like to point out these unconventional tactical patterns. Will Alireza play knight h5? Tanya, great call. It's on the board. And Firouzja wants to win this game. He doesn't just want to hold a draw. He senses that he's got the psychological advantage. He's got Magnus tilted. And let me tell you, queen b3, queen d1, queen b3, queen d1, not exactly my version of a successful Italian.
That's a clear sign that something has gone wrong in the opening. When you have to come back with the queen to the square d1 so quickly, things are not looking great. Knight f4 is an option. You're pointing out queen f6. I like both these moves. Very, very strange play here by Magnus, and I think Alireza should be more than happy with what he's gotten out of the opening. Daniel, I see a move on the board, by the way. I think he's gone for queen to f6. We see that on our live board on that bottom left. So great call by you there. And knight takes pawn now doesn't work because the queen can capture that knight, and then eventually its own knight is protected by the queen. So no tactics on the board. I don't think Magnus is happy with the way the opening's gone.
And there's another problem. If he plays knight h2, another typical idea in the Italian, there's knight h5 to g3, sending the rook away. So lots of tactical nastiness to keep in mind if you're white. Now, Magnus can kind of go for the nuclear option, just take this knight off the board. But then you're handing over the bishop pair. If you have to play bishop takes f4, it's a sign that you're worse and that things have gone wrong. Let me tell you, Tanya, he's worse and things have gone wrong.
This is a dream Italian with black. You've got everything that you want. Your knight has landed on f4. You're already threatening tactics once the queen arrives on g6. You got checkmating ideas coming on the board. Bishop takes pawn is a massive threat now. And Magnus Carlsen, with head in hands, is trying to deal with this and just wondering, how did he land up in this position? In what move are we on?
I'm going to get the live position here. Just a moment. There we go. Bishop e3 on the board. And wait a second. Bishop takes h3. He wants bishop takes f4. Let's put this on the analysis board. Can Alireza get away with this move? No, I don't think so. Bishop takes f4 is Magnus's idea. Tanya, this is such a devilish trap. Look at this. Queen takes f4, gh. You're feeling cool. You give a check on g3. And much like the first game, Alireza did this to disarm Magnus's attack. Here, the roles would be reversed. This knight on h2, for people trying to learn from these games, this is a very, very powerful defender. Alireza would run out of pieces. That's not possible. Maybe you can play knight takes h3, but I don't think so. I think if you're Firouzja, forget about the tactics. Just play a move like bishop e6 and enjoy your life. Maybe
also very tempting to put that queen on g6. Yeah, I was just going to say, not only do you threaten a mate in one, bishop h3 becomes even more powerful. And then you've got to analyze what happens after white was to take that knight on f4. But Alireza, with a different approach, he wants to get another piece into the attack. He wants to get the knight from the queen side over to g6 to try to reinforce that knight on f4. It's given a question mark, but Daniel, to me, it doesn't feel like a bad move at all. I actually think it just keeps all the pressure and the threats in the position.
Yeah, the top engine move was G7, G5, which you don't see every day in the Italian. It's a very hard move to play against Magnus. Knight E7 is a very typical approach to the position, get the knight around to G6. And Magnus responds in textbook fashion. You get a piece out of the center. I try to punish you by striking in the center. I'm curious, though, what Magnus is intending against knight E7 to G6. How is he going to prosecute that tension in the center? Is he going to exchange on E5 and then exchange on A7? Will we see a move like king to H2 from Magnus, which is a really nice way of sidestepping these dangerous threats with knight takes H3? I think Firouzja senses that this is an important moment where he needs to keep that foot on the gas pedal. Otherwise, the momentum of the game might start shifting in Magnus's direction. I think it already has, actually, after a move like king H2, Tanya. And I'm not really seeing where Alireza's going with this knight. Maybe H4.
Well, the whole idea is that you kind of just reinforce that knight on F4, and at some point you want to jump onto H4 to take away a key defender in White's camp. The other thing that this knight maneuver does for Black, a very typical plan in the Italian, is to push in the center, right? Now that the C6 square has been left empty, you could actually go C6, and if you can dream and try and get D5, that would be ideal. But I think at some point, Daniel, Magnus does intend to take on E5, making sure that Alireza doesn't get that D5 break in.
I got to shout you out, Tanya. I think you're pointing out a lot of correct things. C6, something I completely forgot about. That is a very important idea. And I think Alireza is going to operate in the center. Great call. Hats off to you. C6 is on the board. Firouzja still very much in the driver's seat. And D5 is a force to be reckoned with if you're Magnus Carlsen, because that king on H2, Tanya, might very well get caught in the crossfire, right? You can imagine a scenario where White trades twice on E5 and suddenly the king is caught in a potential discovered check. Magnus is still worse. And he's a single blunder away from getting destroyed in the king side and on the center. In the center and on the king side. Wrong way around.
The thing is, right, Alireza is coming for the king, and you can't allow Black to open up with D5, so have to trade on E5. And once again, to me, it is the most natural looking move, but it feels like the computer not happy, gives it an inaccuracy. Daniel, I really like your idea. Instead of taking it with the pawn, which feels like a hand move in this kind of position, to consolidate that knight on F4, reinforce it, knight takes pawn would really put the pressure on Magnus. What do you think Alireza is going to decide on? Knight takes pawn or pawn takes pawn?
The fact that he's pausing here tells us he's not just automatically going to recapture the pawn. This is one of the things which makes these top players so good. They sense the moment when, wait a second, let me resist the urge to make the autopilot move. Let me go a little bit deeper into the position and find a more creative way to pose problems. I really like the look of knight takes E5 for two reasons. The first is, again, exploiting that vulnerable king position. The second reason, Tanya, is after knight E5, queen E5, you're immediately hitting the E4 pawn. You're saving the possibility of pushing D5. So even though the pawn on D6 is technically a weakness, it could very well turn into a strength if it's pushed one square forward. Magnus is walking on hot coals here, and let's see if he can handle the tension. I don't know. It's looking unpleasant.
And it's really not something anyone could have predicted at the start of the day, that we would be sitting here right now in one of the two rapid games of the grand final reset, Alireza with the black pieces and an advantage out of the opening. It might not be a big advantage, and we can see it, that objectively it's still a balanced position. But think about it. You're playing with the white pieces. Black's knights are coming at you. The queen is so active. You feel like you've kind of lost out on that Italian edge that you get with white. Your knight on b3, what's that even doing there? Queen takes knight, a threat on the king. The queen takes pawn that you pointed out earlier would also threaten a checkmate in one on g2.
The computer is so evil, and so is Magnus Carlsen. Bishop takes a7, laughing in the face of danger, saying, you know what? Wow. You take this discovered check and put it where the sun don't shine. The big problem is that if Black moves the knight away with a check, let's take knight takes h3 as an illustration, White can actually push the pawn in Black's face, f4, hitting the queen, and earning a tempo for this bishop to evacuate. You can play knight takes f4, and after bishop to d4, White saves the extra piece. Alireza goes for a different intermezzo. He plays queen takes e4, hitting the bishop, hitting the mate, hitting the other bishop. But if Magnus just calmly defends against the mate threat, back to the tall coat, Tanya, you can only take one of my pieces at a time. Alireza will have to decide which of these bishops he's going to capture. And if he takes the one on a7, Magnus might have some devilish tactics with queen takes d6 and knight back to d2. I've got no clue what's going on here. Nope, bishop e3.
Yeah, because the bishop on a7 was hanging, so you don't have time really to take on d6, or maybe at least you had to calculate the idea that you were mentioning. But bishop e3, but you're down a pawn, right? Do you have enough compensation here? I see the opposite color bishop, but it just feels like if anyone can push here, it's got to be black.
Black is up a pawn, and he's got the initiative. Magnus had an absolutely sick idea earlier on. He could have established material equality. I was trying to calculate it in my head, but it's too late for that. I'll show it in the game review. Right now, it's important to point out, not only is Alireza up a pawn, but look at his pieces, right? He's occupying these light squares. He's got Magnus's king in a very nasty little net, but Carlsen says, I am fighting. I'm fighting. I'm getting my own pieces active, and knight e4 is a nasty, nasty little move. d5 runs into knight d6, and it's black who actually loses a piece in that scenario. Oh.
It's getting very complicated right now. So
back.
He hits
There's
the
a knight f6 check that you have to be careful about. Watch out.
But in that position, you could probably take, because you always have this queen e5 check to defend everything, right, Daniel?
Yeah, I'm trying to make some of these bullet shenanigans work, and I'm failing. Magnus is pausing here because he's not automatically going to take on d6. He's probably thinking about a move like queen to d4. He's thinking about a well-timed sacrifice on f6. What am I even talking about? I'm looking at this position. Queen takes d6, Tanya. I'm going to put this on the board. Knight to c4. And now I was briefly calculating knight f6. The eval bar doesn't hate this move, because after queen to g3, king h8, bishop to d4, imagine having this position against Magnus Carlsen. I would be terrified. There's a mate threat. There's a rook coming into e1. So something for Magnus to calculate. Instead, he has gone for queen to d4, leaving this pawn for the knight, offering a queen trade. Alireza says, sure thing.
This is the point, right? You just go into an endgame now, and now Magnus has to try to hold this one, because he's not down just one pawn. He's down 2 pawns, and I see the compensation. It's around the dark squares. Those 2 pawns on the queen side that Magnus has, they stop the 3 pawns that you've got. The bishop on e3 is stronger than the bishop on c8 because of the pawn structure that you're highlighting. But Daniel, it still feels like black can try to squeeze something here.
Listen, as Abraham Lincoln said, 2 extra pawns is 2 extra pawns. That was the preamble to the Gettysburg Address. Rook fb1, though, Magnus Carlsen is also Magnus Carlsen, and we know how good he is typically at holding these types of endgames. If I had the black pieces here against Magnus, I would be thinking about an exit ramp. I would be thinking about how to bail out into a draw, because the bishop is coming to c5, Tanya. Magnus is dominating these dark squares, and the knight is actually in quite a bit of trouble. If you drop back to c4, the rook can move up to b4 a little bit later, and defending the knight with bishop e6 would involve giving up the b7 pawn. This is a very important pawn, because if that pawn collapses, then you're saddled with 2 more weaknesses on the queen side. I'm going to make a bold prediction and claim that Magnus is actually potentially playing this position for a win.
We saw him do that, right? In the rapid game where he was down 2 pawns in that crazy rook pawn ending, he was actually pushing for more eventually. And in these opposite color bishop complexes, it can get really tricky, because the bishops can't be challenged. You're playing on so many of the squares that your opponent cannot defend. Look at the way Magnus places his rook on a dark square. Now the other rook will join the party, either from b1 or from e1, trying to eye that e5 pawn. But first, Alireza has to answer an unpleasant question. Knight d2, he develops the bishop, but gives up a pawn on the way.
I thought that Magnus should have paused there, because rook takes b7 wasn't the only move. He also had knight g5. I would have investigated some of these alternatives. There we go, h6 by Alireza. The opportunity train has passed. Now the knight on e4 doesn't have a clear path forward. Yet again, I love the way that Alireza handles these endgames. He's a phenomenal endgame player. And Magnus still trying to squeeze, to chisel his way through these dark scored weaknesses, also using Alireza's clock against him.
And the thing is that Magnus's last move actually offers a trade of the minor pieces, which would get rid of the opposite color bishop complex. Usually, that would favor the side with the extra pawn. But this would allow the a pawn to move on to b6, which would make a really strong passer. And then I would agree with everything that you've just said, that Magnus is going to start getting more than ambitious. Knight coming to c5, that pawn replacing the bishop on b6, the rook from a1 attacking a6. Only Magnus Carlsen can be better there.
That's the thing, right? There's the Magnus effect on full display. You could have 3 extra pawns and you're still going to believe that you're on the defensive. Alireza might very well be on the defensive. From a practical standpoint, I would be very seriously considering a bailout option with rook b8. It's on the board. And does Magnus keep the rooks on the board? Does he play rook c7 here? That would involve giving up another pawn. And more importantly, that would involve giving up the pride of his position, the bishop on b6. If I'm Carlsen, I'm contemplating rook takes b8 and knight c5. Of course, I'm not Magnus Carlsen, unfortunately. So I don't know what he's actually going to go for.
But everything that you just said right now, right? He's probably got to trade. And just as I said, he doesn't. Magnus is going all out in this position. He's giving another pawn.
He's playing for the win. He's going to go knight c5. He's going to put all of his eggs in the piece activity basket. And that's a pretty good basket to put your eggs in, because once the knight gets to c5, it hits the bishop. The bishop doesn't have too many safe squares to jump to. And king f8 runs into rook takes c6 and knight d7. So how easy is it to blunder when you've got just a couple of seconds left and your opponent's knight is wilding? Bishop to d5. Rook takes e5 by Carlsen.
He does regain a pawn, and it turns out to be an inaccuracy. But the fact that Magnus feels he has enough compensation here, to me, that's just amazing. And rook b5, that's a blunder.
There's also this cool tactic. Knight to d7 sets up the sort of semi-threat of rook takes a6. He just plays rook takes a6 straight away, and he wins the pawn bag, and suddenly material is equal. How did that happen? How is the pawn count even? Wasn't Alireza just up 2 pawns, potentially even 3?
Just 2 moves ago. It's the Magnus Carlsen effect. Rook d8 played. The material is level. White needs to defend the knight. White's rooks are more active right now. Daniel, how do you evaluate this ending? Do you think after all the material balance has been restored, Alireza can actually bail this out because it's simplified?
Yeah, because I think knight d3 runs into bishop takes f3. Knight e4 allows the bailout option with bishop takes e4. I think that we're going to get a peaceful result in the first game. This game has been anything but peaceful. If Magnus wants to stubbornly cling to chances of winning this game, then you play knight a4. You keep an imbalance on the board, but then you're clinging to chances of losing this game. And Tanya, knight a4, bishop takes f3 is actually still possible, because when the pawn recaptures the rook, it hits the knight. So there's no reason for Magnus to do anything crazy, and they have agreed to a draw.
Wow. A draw offered and a draw accepted. And Alireza Firouzja isn't very happy with that. The one would feel that with the black pieces in a best of 2, an ideal start for Alireza, but he sensed it, that he got an advantage. But getting an advantage against Magnus is far from over. Magnus still in thoughts, probably checking out what just happened, getting ready for the next game. The score is level. Alireza starts with white. Daniel, how much of an edge does that give Firouzja? The final rapid game, and he's got the white pieces.
Honestly, the way that these games have gone, I think the color is the least important factor. It is a factor, and still, you know, these top players, they like to be white in a pivotal game. But Alireza is going to be a little bit disappointed about the way that that one went, because there was a moment early in the middle game, Tanya, and I thought that he was just going to run away with it. Magnus was shuttling his queen from b3 to d1. He was upset, and Carlsen finds that reserve of mental strength. He hunkers down, holds the line, and now we're set up for a incredible final game.
It is the final rapid game in the best of 2. We see Magnus Carlsen on the screen right there, probably checking out what just happened. Meanwhile,
sure.
Alireza Firouzja also feeling that he missed some chances. Daniel, like you said, peaceful result, but the game was anything but peaceful. Take us through some of the key moments as the complications were on the board.
Well, there's definitely a lot to analyze, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, but Early in the opening, this choice by Magnus to play queen b3 was coolly rebuffed by Firouzja. The queen ultimately heads back to d1, allowing Firouzja to build up a very impressive assortment of attackers on the king side. And after bishop e3, apparently a big advantage was yielded by the move g7, g5. Easier said than done. Trying to shove this pawn through to g4, Magnus would have likely dropped his knight back to h8, and now Firouzja could have built up the attack by shifting his king to h8, dropping the queen back to g7, and sending his f-pawn down the board. This would have put Magnus on the ropes early on. Instead, we saw Magnus pushing d4. We saw liquidation in the center, and now bishop takes a7 was a really, really gutsy move by Magnus. In this position, Magnus had an incredible resource. He could have gone rook g1 and met queen takes c4 with queen takes d6, leaving both of his minor pieces on pre. Here's the point. If Alireza takes the bishop, then Magnus drops the knight back, forcing the queen to lose contact with the knight on f4. If Alireza takes the knight on b3, then Magnus simply takes on f4, and the detail that he likely missed, queen to b8. The b8 square has had a magical spell on it throughout the day. Magnus put a bishop there. Here he would have put a queen on b8, and the rook on a7 is simply trapped. Instead, Magnus played f3. He still could have played queen takes d6 in this position. Instead, he acquiesced to a pawn down position, but was able to save it with some very accurate play. The queens were traded. Alireza had some chances to keep a relatively big advantage, but I didn't see any huge turnarounds. Magnus played bishop b6. There was one moment toward the end of the game. Alireza could have played the move rook to b2, and the engine was giving him a sizable advantage. Would Magnus have held the draw here? Likely he would have. Alireza with less than a minute on the clock. Instead, we saw a bailout after rook b5, rook takes a6. The players agreed to a draw because a knight for bishop trade is inevitable, leading to a dead drawn rook endgame. What an interesting battle. What an epic match this has been. And our seatbelts better remain fastened, Tanya, because this final game, maybe the final game, maybe it's not the final game. If it's a draw, we will get another Armageddon. But I'm out of breath. I was tired when this commentary began. Now I'm locked and loaded. This has been amazing.
The chess action has been just so intense every single game by these two players. And this is why we love this rivalry. This is why everyone wants a Magnus versus Alireza match, including Magnus himself. And there we see he is getting ready for the final rapid game. It is the final rapid game of the Chess.com Championship. If this one ends in a draw, we will go on to the Armageddon. Daniel, prediction time. Will we have a champion in this game, or does this go down to the wire?
I don't know what I want to see happen. I think from the commentator's perspective, another Armageddon would be sick. I think we're going to get a decisive result. I just don't see a way for the players to find their way to a draw one more time. Alireza's got the white pieces. He has shown a predilection for one d4, one knight f3. So he's kept the e4 pawn, the e pawn on its home base throughout the CCT. Is it a good idea for him to switch up his strategy in this pivotal moment? Impossible to predict, Tanya. It's all about what the players are more comfortable with. My bias, personally, is toward one e4. That is the move that Alireza played as a little kid. That is the move that he's preferred in the blitz time control. What will he bring to the table in this critical game? Boom.
Finally, you've been waiting to see one e4 since the start of the day, and we get it. But look at that. It is the Petrov, the Russian defense by Magnus Carlsen, and it's Alireza with the first pause. How much of a surprise is knight f6 to Alireza right now?
Well, this has not been a typical choice for Magnus, right? Jan Nepomniachtchi, yes. Jan Krzysztof Duda, yes. But Magnus has played knight c6 throughout his career. Now we're getting a sideline. Alireza playing d takes e5. This is not the most common move. Bishop to d3 is more common, so I'm just going to spotlight that for a second. Here we get a line that has been played. I saw some Arjun Erigaisi games here. It's a very unconventional pawn structure, Tanya, with a white pawn on e5, a black pawn on d5, and now the queen on d7. There's way too much nuance for us to explain it in the context of a rapid game. What I will say is that both players are likely to castle kingside, and this battle is likely to be decided with some very deep play in the center of the board.
And we see the rerouting of the knight to the really nice spot on e6. Daniel, looking at the opening outcome, I know it's still early on, and even though it's one of the most solid openings of chess, one that has stood the test of time, I do think that the result will reflect that. I think we're going to have a draw in this one, and Magnus's choice of knight f6 seems to imply that he wants to take it to the Armageddon. And just as I say that, b6 on the board, so inviting a little bit of an interesting play. The bishop will come to b7, the pawn will go to c5. The other pawn will move to d4. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Magnus doesn't mind a second Armageddon. His opening choice indicates that if Alireza really wants a draw with white, he can make it. But Alireza wants to end this match right here and right now. I think his heart can't take another Armageddon. This choice to play b6 and bishop b7, I've never seen. I'm not too experienced in this line in general. But Magnus actually delaying the development of his kingside, that tells me he actually might want to castle queenside and checkmate Alireza with a quick pawn storm. No, c5. The engine doesn't like it. I really liked, Tanya, the possibility of knight c6 and long castle. I thought Magnus should have invested some more time thinking about that option.
c5, he wants to control more of the center and then bring out the knight to c6. But how much of an option is long castle anymore? Is that even on the table, considering that black has expanded with c5, d5, giving Alireza the hook when he strikes with b4? If we were to see a queenside castle by Magnus Carlsen, do you think that's still on the cards?
It definitely is on the table. Just because you've played c5 doesn't mean you can't castle queenside. It's more dangerous now. White has the possibility of b4. But I'm really confused at Alireza's last move. He kind of autopiloted this weird move c3. If we could pull up an analysis board, I'm not sure what the point of that move was. My preference would have been a move like knight g3 or knight to e3, trying to quickly get this knight around to d6, because that is the square that black weakens when he pushes the c-pawn. Also, this would have prevented Magnus from easily developing his knight. Maybe Firouzja was afraid of a move like d4, but with the knight landing on f5, or maybe landing on c4, this is a better square. This would have been a very nice position for Firouzja. Instead, he allows Magnus's knight to come out to c6. And if you try to correct your mistake, Tanya, knight e3 might now walk into d4. d4 is a really scary prospect in the long run because it opens up black's bishop, it opens up the center. And I'm starting to feel a little bit apprehensive about the outcome of this opening for Alireza Firouzja.
I'm liking it so far for black. And when bishop b7 was on the board, Daniel, I had the idea of c5 and trying to get in d4 in as quickly as possible. And that would mean a really strong sniper on b7. The big question for Magnus will be about king safety here. Where does he want to place the king? Does he have enough time to actually go bishop b7, shut castle, get a rook to d8, and then go d4? Give black 4 moves, and you're talking about a position where it's only black playing. Meanwhile, Alireza needs to establish a knight on f5. He needs to find his own activity, his own play in this game. And Daniel, step 1 towards that, knight g3 on the board. And you're pointing out g6. Is that the way to finish development for black here?
It's certainly the automatic move, right? It's the move that you're taught to play. G6, there's 2 squares between a pawn and a knight on the same file. Robert Hess really likes to point out that greatly restricts the mobility of the knight. The knight doesn't have f5, it doesn't have h5. Maybe Alireza is banking on the possibility of c4, right? Weirdly enough, now you actually want to provoke black into pushing d4, because that gives the knight a new vista. It gives the knight the e4 square. That is the worst case scenario for black. You do not want to allow this knight access to f6 or d6. The problem with c4 is that black is not obliged to play d4. Black can castle queenside. Magnus could elect to put a knight on d4. And Alireza, he just has the tougher problems to solve, Tanya, as we're seeing from his time usage. He's down 3 minutes on the clock. His position doesn't look great to me. And Magnus has a very clear roadmap. h5, bishop e7, easy moves for black here is exactly what you want in a pivotal game like this.
And a very committal decision here by Alireza. And I don't know if that's clever or rattled right now, but it definitely changes the dynamics quite a bit, because he's offering a bishop trade for the knight, which Magnus declines. To me, it felt like the natural decision, right? You've got a dark squared weakness. You want to get rid of your opponent's bishop, the strong bishop on g5, which can land on f6. Daniel, bishop g7, would that have been your move of choice as well?
Initially, I also thought Magnus was going to take on g5. Then I spotted this idea of bishop e2 to g4, and that might have been the deciding factor. That would have precluded Magnus from castling queenside. Now he can't castle queenside because it's against the rules of chess. He can castle kingside. That might be against the rules of the position. But if you trade on f6, Tanya, this is what you're implying. That rook gets active. The bishop can jump to b5. We might see bishop b5 and bishop g5 in the same game. Alireza always able to stir up complications. He's so good at that.
Just out of nowhere, right? You give him a move or two, it looks like a cagey, simple, strategic position, and then there's wildfire on the board. Daniel, after everything you pointed out, king's safety is of primary importance right now, and Magnus has to take a decision. What about the idea of actually going a queenside castle, which right now is illegal, but you could snap off the bishop on f6. Force white to take that bishop back with the pawn. So you've got these doubled pawns on the f file and say, I'm not going kingside castle. Because yes, that's super dangerous. Queen d2, queen h6. It could be a checkmate in 3. But then you go queenside castle. Bishop takes bishop. Pawn takes bishop. Castle then on the other side of the board.
Tanya, I think that's another great call by you. And I think we will see just that. Because if you ask yourself what the alternative is, and Magnus is just not happy. He's not happy at the way things are going in the match. Maybe this game has turned in Alireza's favor, but castling kingside, allowing all of these shenanigans with a knight coming to e4, which, by the way, is possible. Shocking to me. I liked your approach. He does castle kingside, but what about bishop takes g7 and knight e4? What about queen to d2? Is Magnus not afraid of getting checkmated on the kingside? Let's see what he has in store, because Alireza is smelling blood. Queen to d2 is on the board. This game has turned around yet again in white's favor.
This is suddenly going into Alireza's territory, right? Where he's going to have a go at Magnus's king. He's going to come for it. The attack kind of flows in these kind of positions. You've got ideas of the knight jumping onto g5.
Yep.
Always watch out for tricks like knight h5, knight f5, Daniel. If your queen can arrive on the g5 square, the h-pawn can start marching up the board. h4, h5, always on call here. And Magnus, meanwhile, is he relying on d4? Because d4 is such a double-edged move, giving away that e4 square.
That's kind of what the doctor ordered, though, because right now, Alireza is just a couple of moves away from setting up decisive threats. And I want to show one very important line. Magnus might end up taking on f6, and he might end up trying to zigzag this queen to the f4 square. But if he goes after the f6 pawn, the eval bar shoots up, and I think it's because of knight h5. Very typical idea. And people watching this might say, but why can't black take the knight? After queen h6, white has no threats. That's not true. White isn't threatening the immediate checkmate on g7, yes, but there is no way to stop the secondary threats with knight to g5 and bishop to d3, and there is no way for black to pile up the pressure on the f6 pawn. You can play king h8. That's not going to help you after a knight to g5. Classic deflection. And then Hikaru would love to hear me say this, a lolly's mate on g7. How many games have been lost at all levels due to this checkmating construction? Magnus Carlsen seems like a broken man right now, and he needs to find a hidden reserve of strength. My guess is that he's calculating d4, Tanya, but I'm very skeptical about the possibility of a move like that working, given how many squares white is able to access with his bloodthirsty knight.
I've been on the receiving end of so many of those checkmates, and Daniel, you least expect them, but moves like knight f5 and knight h5, and just magic out of nowhere. So you've got to watch out for those threats, and I think really nicely he does get rid of that bishop, but he has to be precise. I really liked your other idea. I don't believe he's going to go for the f6 pawn. Magnus will not fall for this idea. Great motive pointed out by you. Queen to d6 might allow certain jumps by that knight with the pinned d5 pawn. So he moves away to c7. He wants to trade on that f4 square. It looks like you're just in time to make that happen. Because knight h5, you pick up the knight, queen to h6 with the same idea, but now you've got queen f4 coming in, defending g5.
Yeah, this is tempo for tempo play, and Magnus has the knight on e6 to thank for making this possible. That knight is the hero of his position. It's guarding the g7 square. It's also setting up this possibility of queen to f4. The best thing that black can do right now is to get the queens off the board. That doesn't mean that his problems are over. And Alireza could choose a positional move like bishop to b5, preparing to swap the knight on c6 and paving the way for his other stallion to jump into e5. So I would caution people against thinking that once the queens are traded, Black's king is safe and everything is copacetic. It's not. The pawn on f6 is still a massive, massive problem in the long run, but definitely a step in the right direction for Magnus to get his queen to f4. At the very least, he's not going to get mated in the middle game, which is saying a lot, given how bad his situation looked just a couple of moves ago. The other thing, Tanya, do not take this pawn because you open yourself up to all sorts of nasty discoveries against the queen.
Knight d4 would hit the queen. Also jump in with the knight to c2 with further folks on the rook. So you really don't want to open up that bishop on b7. Don't get greedy just yet. But I saw Magnus on the screen while you were breaking this down. And Daniel, he just looks really spent. Do you think fatigue right now is a factor with everything that has happened today? And is he struggling a little bit with his mindset? Because he did not look happy on the camera at all.
Well, he's exasperated. He's frustrated that he's in this situation in the first place, given that he was literally one move away. He was one rook trade away from taking this match. So Magnus is tougher on himself than any chess fan can possibly be. You know, these players, a single mistake often send them over the edge. Magnus demands perfection from himself, and he's been short of that so far today. So he's exasperated, but right now, I like the way that he's playing. And Alireza, queen takes d5. What a gutsy move.
What?
Just snapping the pawn off the board. Magnus immediately responding with a weird retreat. Knight c to d8. I thought that there was knight a5. Knight d4 deserved consideration. Instant response.
At least to think about it, because what is that knight from d8 doing? It is just coming in the way of its own knights. And we see a series of trades take place. White has got an extra pawn, but look at what's happening on the f-file. That's a total traffic jam. Quite an ugly pawn structure for Alireza. Daniel, I definitely see the compensation, and Magnus has magically managed to transfer his knights from e6 to f4. Is this inching closer to the Armageddon?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I'm a little bit stunned at the speed with which Magnus got this position. You know, there were other things to consider. Obviously, White has the tripled pawns, or the Irish pawns, as they're affectionately known in some circles, but it's not about the tripled pawns. The most important pawn is sitting on f6. It's actually very well protected, and White's bishop is a monster piece here. It's got a complete monopoly over the light squares. It's preventing the other rook from coming into the game. So Magnus has to find a way to work around that bishop, maybe go h6, get his king around to g6. It's anybody's game. Alireza could lose control of this, Tanya. Very important for us to indicate if Firouzja loses the f6 pawn, he's going to be worse. So it's not like he has a blank check here, but he's definitely in the driver's seat for the time being. And another excellent move. Bishop to d7. Will he exchange on e6?
But does he need to rush with that? Because the bishop from d7 doesn't only eye that exchange, it also gives White the time to double up on the d file. You could exchange on your terms. You could put more pressure on that black rook on d8. So something to think about right now for Alireza. Does he keep the pressure? He goes in with the rook. Once again, Daniel not only doubling down on that knight, but I think he's eyeing a double up on the d file and then take on e6.
Alireza is a perennially underrated endgame player. People just assume that he's young, he's washed. Alireza is one of the top endgame players of this new generation. He really set the trend. I think that's been followed by Noterbeck and Gukesh and the other players who devote tons of training time to the endgame. Who was the first to do that in this new generation? It's Firouzja. He's been doing a great job thus far, but he's very far away from a full point here. If he plays bishop takes c6, Tanya, Magnus is not going to go rook takes d6. He's going to play knight f4 takes e6, and he's got everything defended. Somehow, Magnus is staying alive. He's also 2 minutes up on the clock.
And it's so easy to forget that Alireza Firouzja is just 21 years old. He's been at the top of the elite chess world for so long that you just seem to forget that he's one of the younger generations right now. And Daniel, absolutely agree with you. We know him for his tactical style, his aggressive play, his intuitive sacrifices. But even in the Chess.com Classic, he has shown some incredible technique in the endgame.
I like the way that he's handling this endgame, but I think Magnus is finding all of the best moves, all of the money moves, exchanging a pair of rooks, right? Alireza could not have avoided that trade because of the threat of a checkmate, and a draw has been agreed.
Whoa.
They have mutually agreed, let's get this into the Armageddon. Let's give the fans more reason to be nervous and more reason to see the cardiologist.
And there's only one guy on the screen who is laughing, and that is Alireza Firouzja. Magnus Carlsen means business right now. Alireza played the last move, lines up the bishop against the king, and then offers a draw, which is accepted. This one goes down to its second Armageddon of the day. Daniel, what an absolutely spectacular grand final.
Well, that was a slightly anticlimactic finale, and I think a lot of the people watching are like, what just happened? Who does this draw favor? Once the rooks got traded, I'll delve into this into the game review. I think a draw is a reasonable result. Neither player wants to put their butt on the line, and they both just want a breather before the Armageddon. What did we just see? Well, we saw a lot of nervous mistakes in the opening. We saw this weird move c5 by Magnus. This gave Alireza a chance to involve his knight into the game, and instead, he played c3, Magnus in the driver's seat, and then a very strange decision by Carlsen. He could have castled queenside. Instead, he castled kingside, and suddenly his back is against the wall. He's close to getting checkmated, but an amazing decision to play queen c7, get the queen to f4. Alireza grabs the pawn on d5. Here, the best move was knight c7, but instead, knight dropped back to d8, inviting a queen trade. And after the queen trade, Alireza does have a big advantage in the endgame. Apparently, the best move was actually g takes f3. Very hard move to play, but this would have given white a near decisive advantage. Queen takes f3, the rook swings into the action, rook to e4, and bishop e2 threatens to trap the queen. This would have put Magnus Carlsen's back against the wall, but instead, Firouzja trades queens, giving Magnus's knights a new lease on life, allowing the other knight to jump into e6, allowing Magnus to activate his rooks just in the nick of time, and Carlsen, with some excellent, accurate play, gets his king into the game, triggers a series of trades, and Alireza Firouzja accompanies bishop c2 with a draw for it is an equal position. If the game had continued, Magnus would have likely involved his knight into the game. Alireza could have snapped off the pawn on c5, but black has full compensation for the pawn in the form of white's very weak kingside pawn. So the position is equal. A draw is a reasonable result. And we are in, Tanya, for an epic, epic Armageddon. This is one of the all-time classics in the Chess.com Classic.
You could write an entire book just on this grand final. It has been equal amounts of entertainment in the opening, in the middle game, in the end game. We've had turnarounds, we've had emotions, we've had all the drama, an absolute blockbuster, and it continues because a winner will be decided. The grand final is going the distance. We've got our second Armageddon coming up. In the break, you will learn how the Chess.com logo came to be. And when we return, the conclusion of the Chess.com Classic. Daniel, I am so excited. This is exactly the grand final of the dreams, and it's coming up with this big Armageddon to decide the champion. We will see you all in just a few. Don't go anywhere.
Want chess on the go? Check out these essential chess apps. Turn your phone into a chess clock. Improve your game. Find a new challenge. A safe place for kids. Fun and adventure. And of course, play. Learn more at chess.com/apps.
Hi, I'm Eric, CEO and co-founder at Chess.com. When we started this company 18 years ago, one of the first questions we had was, what's our logo going to be? And we thought a lot about it. We looked at all the different chess pieces. There were king logos out there, there were rook logos, there were lots of knight logos for chess companies, but no one had chosen the pawn. In chess, pawns are everything. They dictate the shape of the game. For Chess.com's logo, we wanted the most common piece because we wanted Chess.com to be for every type of chess player. beginners through grandmasters, even world champions. As we began the process of thinking about our logo, we also kicked off a design contest with a design contest service online to hopefully get some inspiration and see some ideas that we might choose from. But what we got back wasn't great. It didn't align with our vision. None of it resonated with us. It was either too fancy, or it was all the wrong chess pieces, or it just wasn't good quality. And we were a little bit discouraged. So I then asked a great friend of mine and said, hey, you're a graphic designer. Why don't you put together as many ideas as you can, and we'll see if something resonates. And it did. Inside of these logos that were hand-drawn by my friend, we found some real promising ideas. We knew we wanted something clean and simple. We didn't want anything fancy. We're not fancy people, and even though the game of chess is the most royal of games, we wanted something that felt clean and open and welcoming for everybody. We liked the pawn. We also thought about our colors. Well, everybody was doing blue at the time, and a lot of people for chess did black and white, but that didn't feel right for us. For us, green felt right. It was the color we've been looking at on scholastic chessboards, and no one else had chosen it. So we picked green. We wanted a green pawn. We initially picked something that felt kind of fun and right, but maybe was okay in the year, 2005, but it didn't sit quite right. So pretty soon, we started to angle a little bit different, a little bit simpler, and we came up with this very first version of the green pawn chess.com logo. From there, it's evolved several different times as the pawn shape kind of moved from older and more classical to a little bit newer, and then finally to our current pawn, which is based on our Neo chess pieces, which is our view of the modern future of chess. Designing the chess.com logo was a personal project for me because I was so excited about the feel and the touch of what we would put out in front of the community. What some people don't know about me, they look at me as like the CEO of chess.com, is they probably picture me as like a business person doing like number stuff. I don't care about any of that. What I really love is the product, the feel, the pixels, the design, the buttons, all the different things. I am deeply involved in every aspect of our product, including our logo. And so for me, this was a passion project. I love the elements of design. And I work really closely with a huge, amazing team of talented designers who work on this. And I'm grateful to everybody who has worked on the logo and listened to me be really nitpicky about every single detail of the curve of the pawn and the color and the shading and all the different things. And just really, it's been an awesome collaborative process for us to get to where we are today with the current modern chess.com logo. The chess.com Classic is our celebration of 17 years of working on chess and working with you, the community, to make chess the greatest game ever.
Welcome to the most exciting format in chess, Armageddon. The ultimate tiebreaker. Armageddon grants white more time on the clock, but in return, white must win. A draw secures black the match win. White starts with 10 minutes, and each player submits a confidential bid with an amount of time they are willing to start with. Lowest bid gets to choose their color, usually black, in those coveted draw odds. Let the Armageddon commence.
And the championship comes down to this moment, to this Armageddon, and Magnus Carlsen there with an aggressive bid for the black pieces. He wins the bid, 7 minutes 26 seconds. He gets black. Alireza Firouzja will start with 10 minutes, but in a must-win situation. Daniel, what do you make of the bid? Has Magnus gone far too low to get the black pieces? 7 minutes, 26 seconds.
I think that's a reasonable bid. I think Carlsen basically realizes that the trend of the match has not necessarily favored the white pieces. The opening hasn't been the decisive stage of the game in any of the games they played, and he's learned the lesson from the previous Armageddon. I think that most top players, as I said before the last Armageddon, they like to be black. They like to have draw odds. And once again, for people just joining us, first of all, where have you been? Second of all, there's no increment in the Armageddon, so flagging is on the table. Fast play in the opening is the order of the day. For Alireza Firouzja, will we see one E4 for the second time in a row, or will he revert back to what has brought him here in the first place? Knight F3, D4, maybe something a little bit less theoretical is on the menu.
Flagging is not only on the table, it's highly encouraged in the Armageddon. And right now for Alireza, he has to win on demand. He wins the championship if he does it. Magnus Carlsen needs only a draw for not only his second win in the Champions Chess Star Season 24, but his 8th win in a row. What happened, Daniel?
Magnus's internet went out. I thought my internet was going to go out because there's a huge thunderstorm right now in Charlotte. It's pouring, but maybe the thunderstorm, maybe Magnus threw something at his router. I don't know. But he has just disconnected. We're trying to get him back online. Even Magnus Carlsen has internet problems from time to time.
And if there's a delay, what happens? Does he get a penalty? Does he get a time deficit? Because this is the Armageddon. This could be the moment. And Magnus Carlsen, we are getting a confirmation. We're trying to get him back. We're trying to get into contact with him. Daniel, this is getting messy, and it's off the board mess.
Well, Tanya, in American football, there's a concept called icing the kicker. When you have to kick a field goal to win the game, the opposing team's coach sometimes takes a timeout to make him think about it, to give him a couple minutes just to ponder the significance of the moment. So Magnus, he's icing the commentators, icing the chess fans. We're rearing to go. Our seatbelts are fastened, but a little bit of a maintenance problem before the plane takes off. Let's try to get Magnus back online ASAP. He definitely shouldn't be penalized if it's an internet problem. I don't think anybody wants that. I don't think Alireza would want that additional time penalty. He wants to win this fair and square. At the same time, you don't want to keep the players waiting for too long. So maybe a hotspot. Come on, Magnus, figure it out.
We want him back. We want all the drama and all the action only and only on the board as Alireza Firouzja waits for Magnus to reconnect, to come back and start the games. This is not the way you want it, and I completely agree with you. Least of all, Alireza wants this. He just wants a fair and square Armageddon and to get go. But this is getting tricky. Waiting for Magnus to come back. There has been a disconnect. This is really not the way that anyone wants the ChessCom Championship to be decided.
Now, Magnus might already be in Casablanca, Morocco. The players usually arrive a couple of days before the big tournament. Of course, we will have Casablanca chess in just a couple of days. So this could be out of Magnus's hands. This could be a hotel internet situation. Tanya, I think hotel internet generally has improved substantially in the last couple of years. Back when I was traveling actively in 2010, 2011, I had tons and tons of problems trying to join a meeting from a hotel. It's not as big of a problem anymore, but let's see if we can get Magnus back online.
You really are a prophet, because we're getting a confirmation that it is the hotel internet that went out. The connection's a bit spotty, and Magnus, with his hotel Wi-Fi issue, is working on it. He is trying to connect back. What do you think is going on in Alireza's mind right now, Daniel?
Well, Alireza is just, he's rearing to go, right? There's nothing worse than having a big moment like this and then having a delay. You want to get into the game. You want to start because when you have to marinate on the significance of the moment, you get more and more nervous. At the same time, Alireza is a nice guy. He understands. He knows that Magnus is playing from Casablanca. And maybe we need to get Jose Raul Capablanca to troubleshoot Magnus's internet. I've had the situation, Tanya, so many times. I've commentated from hotels, and I get it. It's very, very stress-inducing when the internet goes out at the worst possible moment. You're running around the room. You're calling a reception. They tell you that the internet's not going to go on for another 24 hours. That's why you got to bring that portable router with you. And you got to make sure that your phone hotspot is ready to go.
I'm just waiting for Magnus to appear on our screen. I just want this Armageddon to start. This is just, the whole heart rate conversation coming back on where it just feels not right. Like this has to be on the board, Daniel. We need Magnus Carlsen to come back. We need him to sort out his internet issue. Wow, this would be just very dramatic. Way too dramatic for my liking if it goes any other way.
And we're going to project the prizes, what's at stake as this escalates to the highest level. The Moroccan Prime Minister, Aziz Al-Khanouch, just got a call. Just kidding. 1-800 Morocco Internet. Let's go. Let's get this Casablanca hotel connection back online. He is back online. $30,000, Tanya, is on the line, as well as 100 points for the winner of this Armageddon. Round of applause. Let's go. A Bishop's opening and Alireza Firouzja sticking to his guns, sticking to what got him here in the first place. Magnus starting with 7 minutes on the clock. That's a bold move.
It's a bold move, but Magnus needs only a draw for the championship. Alireza Firouzja has to win on demand with the white pieces, gets those extra minutes on the clock, and it's a bold opening as well, Daniel. Black gets the central control, but that also means that white can start targeting these central pawns early on once there's a trade on d5.
Yeah, the Bishop's opening is a good balance, right? It's not as theoretical as the Italian, but it's a very cagey opening, and Alireza is playing this more modestly. There's the sort of Hikaru way of playing the Bishop's opening, which is more aggressive. He's playing this almost like a King's Indian attack, right? Keeping his pawns on d3 and e4, and often in almost all e4 openings, the knight makes its way to g3. At the same time, you have to be very, very careful. Knight to c5, you don't want to give away your light squared bishop, and you don't want a total liquidation in the center. I don't like this.
Especially as white. Symmetrical pawn structure. No d4 break on the cards anymore for Alireza. So now he needs to... It's going to be a maneuvering game, right? First question, where do you put that knight from d2? Because you need to open up that bishop on c1. You still have to complete your development. Meanwhile, black's knight can already fall back on e6. Now it's being forced to, Daniel, and start eyeing those dark squares, specifically the f4.
Whoa. I'm very surprised at knight f4 because typically allowing the e-pawn to inch forward to e5 like that is a bad idea. You're taught to avoid this. So I don't think Magnus needed to rush with knight f4, maybe feeling the pressure of the clock. And knight to d6 apparently gives a big advantage for white. Bishop takes d6. Is there an intermezzo with queen to d3 hitting h7 and setting up e takes d6? That is sick. No, but that's unfindable.
But it's beautiful. It's a very cool idea because, and the point you need that intermezzo is because of the massive pin along the e-file. So you can't recapture on d6. And now queen to d3, this would be game over. You just blundered into the whole line. Queen d3, as you pointed out. That is one heck of a move. Queen takes pawn is not just a check. Queen h8 is game over.
And if you play g6, wasting a tempo, now you can play e takes d6. The rook is defended twice. And the fact that black's rooks are disconnected will cost him the game. Black has to drop back to f8. This is a disaster, and Alireza missed it. That was a huge chance. It wasn't winning for white, Tanya. I mean, knight d6, black could have slid the rook away, but it would have been big, big trouble. Now Magnus has a chance to slide his rook away from the line of fire. But bishop e6, I think, is what he's going to choose. This was so hard to see. I mean, how do you even know that a tactic like this exists? I've never seen this pattern myself. And the current position, he's done it anyway.
Because you can't take it twice. There's a c4. There's a pin and win.
Magnus missed it for the second time. This time, the idea is totally different. Bishop e6 by Magnus, his last move. Very neglectful. And now he's in huge trouble. What does he do? c4 is coming anyway. b7 is hanging. f4 is going to be hanging. Black's king is in trouble. You can't take twice on d6. You might have to give up a piece here if you're Magnus Carlsen. You might have to take twice on d6 and then take on b4 and try to save that piece down endgame.
Unbelievable. And Magnus on the camera, he was shaking his head as well. He completely missed this knight jump to d6. And with the championship on the line, this could be the decisive moment. This could be the moment that really matters. And look at that. He looks away. There's no increment. He needs to make a decision. He needs to make it fast. Daniel, what happens if he just slides the rook? What if he tries to defend everything in the position?
Rook b8,
How do
for
you
example,
do
is
that?
on the. It's possible, but white will play c4 anyway, tossing the knight out of d5, and then the f4 pawn is going to fall. And once the f4 pawn falls, white has this mating idea with queen h6, knight g5. I think that the most prudent option for Magnus is to take twice on d6. Well, the most prudent option was to not allow knight d6, but having allowed it, he's going to go rook d8. He's not going to give up the piece. He is in mortal danger here. c5 by Alireza. Look at this beast. Look at this beast on d6. Bishop to e4. Alireza not even hurrying Tanya to take the pawn on f4. He's going to do it in the best possible version. He's totally winning.
Alireza's in beast mode right
Knight
now.
d4.
I mean, he doesn't rush with that move. C5 played, bishop e4. You're pointing out, bring out that other knight, c6.
Oh.
The position is just falling apart for Magnus.
Total collapse. Magnus has to play this miserable move, bishop to d7. Now Alireza is going to take this knight. I think that it's the perfect time to just take on f4. And this knight on d6 is going to seal the deal. Alireza is also up 2.5 minutes on the clock. This game, Magnus is reeling. He's shocked right now, and Alireza is playing this perfectly. Rook b8, still fighting though. It's not over.
It's never over when you're playing against Magnus, but look at the position. He's up a pawn. Look at those two knights. Yes, you've got the bishop pair as black, but there's no hope for the bishops so far. Completely killed by white's activity. Knight on d4, knight on d6, beautifully placed. At some point, the c pawn moves forward to c6. Daniel, it might even be possible right now. This is going from bad to worse, and look at the clock situation. Magnus touching the 4-minute mark. He's disgusted with his position.
He's completely lost, and I think the only chance for Magnus might actually be to try to swap all of the rooks. Take on b1, play rook b8, and pray that Alireza plays c6 prematurely. I don't see a single way for black to survive longer than a few moves, but we know that Magnus is not going to go down easy. He does play rook b8. I like this approach, and if you're Firouzja, you trade on b8. Do you play c6? When is the right moment to strike and to cash in your chips? Is it now? Is it now?
It's so tempting. It's so tempting to just start pushing this passer. There's no attack on it. You're hitting the bishop. You could also play really slow, because what does black want? What is Magnus's next move?
Tanya, Greg Shahadi in the chat says, what we're all thinking, this is the worst position I have ever seen. It really might be. Black has no moves. You can play h4. You can play this Magnus style, right? Get your king to a better spot. But you don't want to overdo it. At some point, you need to cash in your chips. The position is not going to win itself. And I think Firouzja is calculating c6. Oh my God.
And I would be so tempted to play c6 right now, because you really don't see what's wrong with it. The only thing is that the d6 knight gets slightly destabilized, so you might have to watch out for future moves like f6, targeting that e5 pawn.
Knight f3 and c6. I thought bishop to e8 was a slightly annoying response. Alireza tries to find a better moment to do it. He swings his queen to b4, trampolining from side to side, chiseling his way into black's position. Can Magnus stop it with bishop c6? Does he run into knight d4? Maybe the bishop can park on a8. Huh. Look at that defensive resource by Carlsen. Not so fast. Not so fast. Alireza still has some work to do, Tanya.
Magnus, you have to play this all the way through, and you have to play your best chess to beat him, even from this position.
Yes. Even
for someone like Alireza Firouzja, you cannot write him off. Give him one chance, and your advantage will be gone. Knight d4 really wants to be played, but Daniel, that does leave the e5 pawn once again tender. So once the bishop falls back, you'll have to answer some questions. What you're doing about the threat of queen takes pawn. Do you want to commit with f4? Do you want to overpush? But look at that. It's another
Alireza jumping into c8. Man, the back rank has been so adroitly used by minor pieces throughout this match. Bishop to b8 from Magnus. Now we have knight to c8, and it's Alireza's stallion who might have the final word. Is he just going after this pawn? Why not?
Why not? Why
Help
not?
yourself.
But the knight is trapped on a7. The bishop from a4, it takes away the key squares. So you've got to be a little careful over the next few moves to make sure that the knight has a way home. Or at least you have some tactics like c6 always.
Locating forced win. Locating forced win. Where is it? Because knight to d4, Tanya, bishop takes e5. Very, very easy to forget that this pawn is now very, very tender. You would love to play knight a7 to d6. That would be the best move. Queen b7?
Why not?
That's got to be it. That's the secret
that
sauce.
Bishop. If you take the pawn on e5,
sauce.
Wow. Daniel, as you're pointing out, queen b7 is an option. Knight d4, I think you're rushing in because the e5 pawn falls. And right now, Alireza is thinking it's good that he's paused. He's got a minute on the clock. He knows this is the critical moment. If he gets it right over the next couple of moves, he can blitz out the rest, well, bullet out the rest of the game. What are the chances of Magnus saving this one, Daniel?
Non-zero. It's higher than what the eval bar might have you believe, because there's nothing more frustrating than staring at a position, thinking that there must be a forced win and not seeing it, watching your clock dwindle. The one silver lining for Magnus is that there's no increment, and in a crazy time scramble situation, anything can happen. Alireza is investing a ton of time. He knows that this might be the game-deciding moment, and I think that without queen b7, this game is going to go on for another while. He has to find that move, Tanya. If he doesn't find it, Magnus has a chance, and he's found it. He's going to bring the hammer down with c6 on the next move.
And how do you even fight that? The bishop in c7 is pinned. Knight d4 is always in the air. c6 is coming in. Magnus Carlsen is
D4,
feeling the
C6,
pressure right now.
Queen d8,
We've got moves.
maybe.
Queen d8, can you take on d4?
Or can you go queen b4 and fork the bishop and the pawn? Now another pawn
Very
falls.
nice.
Magnus is going to be down 3 pawns. And the c-pawn's going to seal the deal. This is over. Now it's totally winning.
The last time we said it, we saw a massive, massive
That's
turnaround. So, Daniel, this match, you just can't call a result ever until it's over. But queen b4, the difference in these positions is that it's hard to see the compensation or even setting up of tricks as black. White's pieces and white's pawns are just dominating the position.
Yeah, and the knight on a7 is safe. I would try bishop c2. If I'm Carlsen, I'm going to go bishop c2, queen takes d4. Keep the queens on the board. That's your only chance. If the queens come off the board, the c-pawn is going to seal the deal. But Tanya, queen takes d4, queen to b8. There is one more hurdle to cross for Alireza. Bishop to b6 becomes a threat. The knight on a7 still a little bit destabilized. So knight b5, another excellent move by Firouzja. Getting the knight out. Now, do you swap on c7? I think you do. And then you play knight takes d4 and you win the game.
Or maybe queen takes pawn and it still continues for another move or two.
Anything wins, but that's also a problem. Now you have to decide how you're going to win the game. Even queen to d6 should do the trick. Even giving up the c6 pawn, you're up so many pawns that you can give one of them away.
But you need to make a decision. Magnus's only chance is the clock now. It is going to be about trying to flag. But Daniel, 2.5 minutes in this position so far feels like it should be enough for white.
And with 2 extra pawns, just slide your queen over to c4. And the sad thing for Magnus is queen c4, bishop d5. You can play c7 even there. You could give up one queen, another one replaces it, and then black drops the bishop on c4. But you can sense the butterflies in Alireza's stomach. Under normal circumstances, he'd be making moves much faster than he is right now. Can he nail in the final nail in the coffin?
Literally some hair-raising chess here that we're seeing from Alireza. Queen e5, Magnus Carlsen, how does he keep the game going?
Now Alireza is down on the clock. He's down to 2 minutes, trying to find the forced win. We know the Magnus effect. We know how powerful it is. Queen to c4. He's found another perfect move. Queen c7, he'll just send the a-pawn down the board.
And
or
all
f3.
of black's pieces are tied down. You really don't want your queen. Well, there's a checkmate in one. You just simply block the bishop, attack the bishop, but that does allow some checks that you might have to be careful about.
Yeah,
How are you
but
hiding?
king h1.
You go king h2
h1.
and king h1. Or king h1,
Zigzag.
king h2.
Zigzag, Tanya. Queen e1, king h2. The c-pawn is going to seal the deal. Magnus should try to give up the bishop, hope for a mouse slip, do something dirty, put your queen on pre. Try everything.
The thing is, when your opponent's down to 20 seconds, you can try those tricks. But with Alireza having 2 minutes on the clock, Daniel, that's a lot of time. And it's Magnus who's actually lower than Alireza with 1 minute, 40 seconds right now. A dead lost position. This has been just a crazy championship match.
And Alireza is the patriarch of dirty tricks and bullet.
Oh my
That's
gosh, is
that's who
Magnus
I
giving
learned
up?
from. Magnus he knows it's over. Alireza, he's not going to miss anything dumb. He did it again. Magnus Carlsen has resigned. Alireza has done the unimaginable. He has done the unimaginable. This is insane. He's won it.
Alireza Firouzja is the champion of the Chess.com Classic. He does it by defeating the world number one, not in just one match, but he does it twice in 2 Armageddons. Daniel, I don't know who would have predicted this outcome, but what a shocker this has been. And with this win, not only does Alireza win the championship of Chess.com Classic, he punches his ticket to the tour and the season and finals. What a day it's been for the French number one.
One of the craziest comebacks in online chess history. And I know that it's easy to devolve into hyperbole in these moments, but guess what? It's time for some hyperbole because Alireza Firouzja, he's losing game 4 of the grand final. He turns that game around and wins it. He wins the Armageddon on demand with the white pieces. Then he pulls out a draw in the grand final reset. He makes 2 draws. He wins that Armageddon as well with the white pieces. Alireza Firouzja, it's his moment in the sun. The candidates is in the rearview mirror. He is a force to be reckoned with. And for the second time, Magnus Carlsen loses 2 grand finals in a row. He lost to MVL, but the way that Alireza Firouzja managed to pull it off this time, it's going to put him in the CCT Hall of Fame just on the strength of this performance, Tanya.
It's unreal. It's unreal what he's done, how he's done it. Just the thought of having to beat Magnus twice is enough to completely psychologically destroy a player because you just feel like you don't have a shot. Then he shows up, he fights it out in set 1, takes that to the Armageddon, wins that, and then takes the match in the second set. What a performance this has been by Alireza Firouzja, who was knocked down to the elimination bracket on day 1 of the Chess.com Classic. He makes it all the way back up to take the championship.
I mean, there's the final bracket. This bracket is going to be examined and looked at and broken down every which way. Alireza Firouzja comes out of nowhere. He loses to Jan Krzysztof Duda in the winner's quarterfinals, right? He loses that painful Armageddon game. Then he comes back. Look at who he beats. He beats Alexei Sarana. He beats Vincent Keimer. He beats Denis Lazovic. And then he beats Magnus Carlsen 2 times in a row. And I'm happy for Alireza. You know what? He gets a lot of flack. He gets put under a lot of scrutiny by the chess world at large, Tanya. Alireza's watched. Alireza's this. Alireza's old. Alireza's that. Alireza hasn't won a candidates yet. Blah, 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 blah. Alireza Firouzja is here to stay. And he just proved that yet again with an incredible, incredible performance.
Absolutely heroic. I'm just still thinking about everything that went down today and just all parts of the game, just every single move that was on the board, all the fighting decisions, the combative decisions taken by the players, really going for it. Daniel, I think this has perhaps been one of the most spectacular days of chess in Champions Chess Tour history.
I mean, the build-up, right? The build-up yesterday in the Division 2 and Division 3 final, which I had the pleasure and privilege of commentating, but today took the action to the next level. This could have been over 2 hours ago, Tanya. We were 1 move away from congratulating Magnus Carlsen on a 9th consecutive tournament victory. Had he swapped rooks in that double rook endgame, had he made a draw in the 4th game, it was over. The match was over. Alireza was done. He was making evening plans. Magnus Carlsen looking up the best restaurants in Casablanca. Right now, he's looking up electronic stores in Casablanca. Magnus Carlsen has a bitter pill to swallow. He's got a tournament to play in the next couple of days. This one is going to take some time to recover from.
Magnus Carlsen is a beast and he will be back, but turns out he's also human. And after a full day of matches, we have our Chess.com Classic champion. It is Alireza Firouzja, and we've got a big interview coming up with the winner. Alireza will be with us. Don't forget to leave your questions in chat during the break. We'll be back on the other side with the winner of the Chess.com Classic.
Do you regret choosing chess as a career?
Something that he said there was a lie.
Do you ever regret walking away from the Classical World Championship?
That's also a lie.
Do you think I'm the best chess player of all time?
Have you ever played a competitive game while drunk?
Don't ask the question if you don't like the answer.
It's the truth, but it's a very sensitive question for him.
Wow, I feel bad now.
But she's not gonna move it because it's defended. Oh,
she did it! You predicted it, Levy!
I just said don't go there! We need a compilation. Chess.com social media crew, look through the PogChamps games.
Baby! Let's
and
go!
Find how many times I called the move before it happened.
Okay, Levy, you asked for it. Here we go.
It's almost a
Gargus
stalemate.
knows what he's doing. He's gonna try to force
Andrea, there's a stalemate coming. Pawn here, take, king g4. He pushes and it's a stalemate. Oh my goodness.
Well, you clearly, I'm sure you taught Frank about stalemate. Oh.
No!
Okay, just don't push. This, I blame you for all of this. This is your manifestation.
Oh my goodness! Bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes, loses the bishop. And if that happens, I will be heartbroken because you could have just...
How's your heart, Abby? Is it feeling okay? Your heart? How is it?
You can't even script this stuff, my man. Defend the bishop again! I just forgot!
Okay. Okay.
His position is hard to lose as long as it stays how it is.
Yeah, for sure. Unless he starts going totally crazy with something like pawn to g.
What is your ability today? You literally said that in real time.
us the man of the moment, the winner of the Chess.com Classic, Alireza Firouzja. First of all, Alireza, a huge congratulations on this incredible win. What a day of chess it was. Some incredible moments. How are you feeling right now?
Yeah, I feel very exhausted, and I'm just happy it finished at the end, finally.
It was such
felt,
an intense. Sorry, go on.
yeah, it felt like he wanted to play a lot of games today against me because game 4 he could have like, or game it was game 3 I won the first match. He could have, oh, it was game 4. He could have draw this endgame, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
You made such a big comeback in that game 4 and went on to win in the Armageddon. That was the first set, and it feels like it was already years ago. What was going on in your mind in those last few moments of game 4?
I already, when he had the king on e5, pawn on f5, I was like, I lost all my hopes. But yeah, then I saw this rook g3 stuff, and I was a bit optimistic. So I didn't see a clear way for him. Maybe he should have just pushed the pawns over. But yeah, it's very tricky when you're in time trouble. So yeah, somehow I managed to get a chance there. It's not an easy position.
And you managed to convert it. I want to ask you that coming into a match, knowing that you have this Herculean task of